Deep within the bowels of the fortress monastery on Malech, a shrouded night world drifting dangerously close to the torn veil of terror itself, Librarian Galen hunched beneath the oppressive vaults of the Librarius, a gauntleted hand poised motionless above the faded leather binding of an ancient tome. All around him, reaching into the gloom thrown by flickering, unstable lumen globes, walls burdened with the knowledge of ages soared towards unseen heights. Rank upon looming rank of crumbling scrolls and forgotten texts crowded the shelves, each whispering its fragmentary testament to history, some brittle as desiccated bone, others humming faintly beneath ancient wards woven when human colonies were mere sparks on the veil of stars. The ragged light, ceaselessly dancing, sent shadows sprawling like grasping phantoms across the endless spines and carved sigils, making the icons and bound runes upon them writhe in a perpetual, silent dance. The very air pressed down upon Galen, thick with the profound scent of aged vellum layered over the dry, acrid tang of numberless, time-weathered inks. He could taste it profoundly on his tongue, that slow decay of parchment melded inextricably with the faint metallic bitterness of blood-red sealing wax and the stale, mineral bite of iron oxide leaching from countless metal bindings. This sanctum wore time as a physical shroud, and Galen felt the crushing accumulation of centuries settle with palpable force upon his shoulders, an echo of the duty he bore. Beyond the fortress-thick, soundproofed walls, muffled by leagues of stone, a world away yet unnervingly close, echoed the relentless drumbeat of military drills, the clash of steel, the bark of orders, the deep-throated, grating chants of tech priests exercising machine spirits and blessing the chapter's arsenal. Galen drew further into the protective shell of the Librarius. Here, amid the profound, echoing quiet, broken only by the patient, rhythmic scratch of his stylus across densified vellum, the weight was different. Here his hand remained unnaturally steady, each glide of the pen an act of reverence, a conscious sacrament to capture not merely the deeds, but the distilled spirit, the very soul of that most dedicated and shadowed of brotherhoods, the Deathwatch, the long vigil. To chronicle the purpose, the lineage, the meaning. Only here, where the light faltered and died, where silence held dominion like a physical presence, could he truly feel the searing immensity of the honor inherent in that charge. For it was whispered, passed amongst the ranks like sacred lore, that among 100 vaunted space marines hardened by endless war, only one possesses the particular, unflinching resolve required to join the Deathwatch. They are the strange, shadowed brotherhood known by some as the Long Vigil, by others as the Long Watch, an unparalleled assembly of warriors bound not by homeworld, but by grim necessity. Chosen, singled out by the Imperium's own inquisitional might, they are the exarchs who stand firmly, unbreakably, as the last bulwark between fragile humanity and the innumerable nightmarish alien monstrosities that prowl the trackless dark between stars. They are not born from one world, nor one bloodline. Their true lineage is forged from 100 illustrious chapters scattered across the jewels of the Emperor's domain. Each carries within him the distinct history, the unique tradition, the sacred rites of his Primarch's legacy. And yet, upon answering this most hallowed call, they must renounce it all. Though permitted to bear the heraldic mark of their origins upon one shoulder plate, it is a fading echo. Their primary allegiance is sworn irrevocably to the Watch itself. They stand shoulder to grim shoulder, oathbound beneath the somber black and gleaming silver heraldry of the Deathwatch, emblazoned indelibly with the stark sigil of the Inquisition. Ultramarines standing shield to shield with scarred space wolves, the taciturn sons of the Lion marching beside salamanders wreathed in inner fire. Their battlefield songs are the battle cries of the Ordo Xenos, the Inquisition's specialized sword forged solely to confront the existential threat of the alien menace. They hunt the inhuman, the galaxy's terror incarnate, the savage orc hordes roaring with brutal, barely contained violence in perverse hymns of war, the ravenous tyrannid swarms, an unending devouring tide consuming worlds wholesale in their gnawing hunger, the chilling, silent necrons, ancient as the void and indifferent as starlight, returning dreamless and undying from tombs older than time. These dread specters and legions of others are the quarry the Deathwatch stalks, the entities they obliterate. The Watch, however, is not merely a hammer. They stalk their prey to understand it, to dissect its nature with lethal precision. For every alien breed whispers its own peculiar horror, its threat as unique and terrifying as the fundamental flaw in its dark genesis. Only by grasping that alien truth, by plumbing the abyss of its existence, can such a foe be truly conquered. In this crucial, chilling knowledge, the Deathwatch stands peerless within the Imperium. No other order holds such intimate, hard-won understanding of the myriad nightmares clawing at the light, and none possess the sacred, trust the chilling burden of wielding that dreadful knowledge for the ultimate preservation of mankind. Unlike their brother chapters bound to crusade and conquest, the Deathwatch is called forth solely to guard the flickering ember of humanity's future from unimaginable forces pacing beyond the fragile borders of known space. Each battle brother who accepts the sculpin is utterly severed, symbolically and mentally, from his parent chapter. He embraces the long vigil utterly, a bond woven of such profound, terrible secrets that his experiences within the Watch become ironclad mysteries, locked eternally behind multifaceted oaths extracted and enforced by the Inquisition. They leave their bright banners and sacrosanct chapter colors folded, shrouded in memory. Adorning their alabaster Mark X plate only with the profound, light-swallowing black of the Long Watch, they display the silvered skull of the Inquisition upon one pauldron, while the icon of their Genesis chapter endures, palely remembered, upon the other. Yet even should they eventually return, disenchanted, to their parent fortress, they remain forever altered, forever marked by the weight of the unseen, burdened with the impossible knowledge of what truly lurks and hungers in the surrounding abyss, alien perils and cosmic malignancies that merciful ignorance shields the bulk of the Adeptus Astartes from ever having to conceive. Their organization reflects this profound difference. Deathwatch Marines rarely deploy as the grand companies or proud battalions known to Codex chapters. Instead, they fight as terrifyingly specialized kill teams, lethal, compact units of supremely hardened veterans, each composition a meticulously forged weapon designed for a singular, devastating purpose, their skills as lethally diverse as the alien nightmares they exist to dismantle. Should a threat bloom with apocalyptic potential, if the horror leaks beyond the capacity of a single kill team to contain, then and only then might the Deathwatch gather several such cadres, weaving them into a formidable strike force aimed at the heart of the malignancy. But if even this coalesced might prove insufficient, if the alien tide swells into a war-threatening whole sectors, the dark mantle of bloody conflict must pass inexorably to the vast regiments of the Astra Militarum, or an entire deployed Space Marine chapter, to be managed by brute force and overwhelming numbers across a galaxy-spanning front that the specialized watch cannot sustain. The precise genesis of the Deathwatch chapter is itself steeped in mystery and fragmented accounts, as clouded and contested as any shadowed secret protectively guarded within the Imperium's deepest archives. It is universally known that their forging occurred during an age bleached white by galactic desperation, a time when survival itself hung by the threads of a fraying rope. Yet, whether this birth was a calculated act of strategic genius, or a desperate, divine alchemy of scattered forces brought screaming together by necessity's implacable hand, this pivotal truth remains elusive, shifting like sand depending upon whom among the imperial scholars you dare to question. Orthodox histories, held sacrosanct by traditionalist principia, like scholars in their chalk dust sanctuaries on Terra itself, trace the lineage of the Watch to those darkest hours known as the time of rebirth. It was an era when an unimaginable tempest of greenskin savagery roared across the stars, a tsunami of barbaric fury unmatched since records began, eclipsing even the grim legends of the epic Annar crusade against the ancient Uruk. This monstrous tide, led by a being of crude, terrifying intellect known only as the Beast, battered worlds into dust, shattering system after system, its relentless fury hammering its way towards the Segmentum Solar until the very radwaste surrounding Terra stirred beneath its ominous shadow. The throne world trembled. The Beast's campaign possessed an immensity that rivaled apocalyptic prophecies, a destructive force so profound that adherence to the known tenets of war seemed tantamount to slow, agonized suicide for the species. In the bloody maelstrom that ensued, after fratricidal combat had extinguished his entire loyalist brotherhood on Annar, it was the chapter master of the shattered Imperial fists, Corund, freshly ascending the mantle of Lord Commander of the Imperium, who rose grimly to face the unspeakable. Arrayed against an enemy that broke armies like kindling, conventional strategies could not but drain the precious lifeblood of the Emperor's domains into sterile dust. Corund dared the unthinkable, the forging of elite, hyper-specialized kill teams. These would be meticulously selected veterans hand-picked from across the fractured pantheon of surviving Adeptus Astartes chapters. They would be surgeons striking with scalpel precision, plunging into diseased flesh to excise the tumor at its core. Corund staked his soul, his honor, the very future, on the desperate hope that these surgical blades might slip past where legions stumbled, find the chink in the beast's monstrous armor, and strike the final, decapitating blow to halt the rampage. Initially, the High Lords of Terra gasped in unified horror at the sacrilege uniting disparate chapters under a novel sigil, placing the Emperor's angels directly under inquisitorial command. The political ramifications alone promised chaos. But despair speaks with the loudest voice. The times were painted crimson. Corund argued, reasoned, pleaded, roared with the desperation of a man watching his species teeter on the pit's lip. Against their rigid doctrines, against ingrained fears, the High Lords, hollowed from exhaustion and foreboding, yielded. Corrin's fragile, dangerous vision coalesced into reality. From the haunted ranks of those who had clawed survival from the inferno of Annar were drawn the first proto-brothers of the Deathwatch. These were ghosts clinging to duty, warriors who had lost everything save an unyielding core of sacred resolve. It was amidst the echoing absence of their fallen brethren that the iron seeds of the Watch were solemnly pressed into the blood-soaked earth. Together, bloodied and grim, they bound themselves with oaths chiseled on grief and necessity, to honor the silence of the dead by ensuring that no such cataclysm would ever again crash unchecked upon humanity's fragile shores. Slowly, inevitably, Corrin's shattered improvisation gained structure, hardened into doctrine. An edict flowed jointly from the shadowed conclaves of the Inquisition and the Senatorum Imperialis. This new fighting force would become the consecrated blade, the militant fist of the newly birthed Ordo Xenos, a dedicated inquisitorial order forged with the singular, holy purpose of countering the manifold alien nightmares poised to consume mankind. Thus was the Deathwatch forged. Much as the Grey Knights ascended as the sacred swords against the abominations of the warp for the Ordo Malleus, the Deathwatch emerged as the soul shield against the creeping horrors sprouting from worlds unknown and voids unimagined. Yet this foundational account, engraved on sanctioned ivory, is not alone in the sepulchral archives. Other histories secreted deeper, etched on forbidden chronovellum, or encoded in bloody almond data crystals stored behind godworm bone doors, whisper of a Genesis more shadowed, perhaps impossibly more ancient. These semi-apocryphal accounts speak in reverent, fearful tones of the conclave of Orio's IV. Here, in a shielded chamber on a forgotten Forge world's dying moon, did the eldest inquisitorial lords, the very weight of their minds bending reality, hold council. They represented the emergent, nascent might of the coalescing Ordo Xenos, their psyche is scarred by centuries of bearing witness to encroaching extinction. Each lord carried a chilling prophecy smoldering in their heart, that the galaxy confronted a future bleached white by annihilation, not by a single enemy, but by a cataclysmic confluence. They foresaw a dark symphony, a final movement where all the diverse nightmares haunting the void would inexorably synthesize the rampaging, prodigious brutality of the orcs swelling in numbers beyond comprehension, the cold and inexorable logic of the Necrons awakening with silent permanence, the Tyranid hive fleet spinning perfect webs of devourment, and horrors unnamed rising in the dark between dreams rising as a single, inexorable beast armada greater than any seen before. Sufficient to crack Terra's defenses, shatter the Astronomicon, and end the Imperium in a closing chord of utter, lightless oblivion. Debate raged for cycles measured in planetary time, logic clashing against visceral terror. Finally, unanimity, cold as a blade pulled from cryostasis. An unprecedented strategy was required, a blade forged in singularity from the scattered steel of the Imperium's finest. They resolved to petition the Adeptus Astartes themselves, demanding nothing less than the formation of a new chapter unlike any conceived before. It would draw only the most proven veterans, the most lethally experienced warriors who had personally stared the alien abyss in its countless eyes and survived to understand the patterns of its predation. This chapter would confound normal strictures. Denied a single homeworld, freed from monolithic tradition, it would function as an intricate, adaptive network of fortified watch stations and mighty fortress monasteries like Malech, buried deep within Imperial space, yet instantly deployable to any breach. Their purpose would be singularity incarnate, the utter annihilation of any and every alien threat, by any means imaginable and unimaginable. This task bore such profound desperation, a holy imperative, that every major chapter, regardless of inner turmoil or crusading urgency, was formally compelled its obedience enforced by the terrifying writ of the Inquisition to contribute its brightest, deadliest sons to this unparalleled endeavor. Call to war dreams, implanted psychochiras, encrypted astropathic pulses burning holes in the warp's fabric. The conclave projected its will across the star-spangled void, summoning the chapter masters to an assembly that would reshape the Imperium's bones. Such a gathering was rare as Voidus on a sun. The lords of the Adeptus Astartes were entities unto themselves, fiercely autonomous, bound by codes of honor older than planets. Yet the specter the Inquisitors unveiled chilled their battle-hardened souls. They spoke not merely of isolated horrors, but of a pattern, a convergence of hatred, an invisible net slowly tightening. They wielded intelligence reports like psychic cudgels, detailing threats beyond nightmare already gathering at the frontiers. This was no abstract warning, it was a divine pronouncement of imminent terminus. Humanity's only possible salvation lay in fracturing the ancient barriers separating chapter from chapter, setting aside sibling rivalries born of millennia, to stand as one indomitable shield wall against the endless, gnawing darkness screaming for human annihilation. By the next planetary dawn, beneath the sickly glow of Orio's IV's poisoned sky, a solemn quorum of historical chapter masters convened. Each bore millennia of scars, physical and psychic, tributes paid to their eternal war. They saw the terrifying truth shimmering in the air, thicker than blood scent. Bound by an oath that echoed the gods' own pronouncements, forged at that moment into an unbreakable covenant, they pledged the lives and souls of their chosen elite, the very marrow of their chapter's honor. Together, breathing air crackling with psychic conviction, they consecrated the birth of a legend. It would be named the Deathwatch. The oath bound them harder than adamantium. The Deathwatch would become sentinels sleeping with open eyes, eternal watchers at the crumbling edge, standing unwavering in the choking darkness nursed between the dying light of stars. The Inquisition, pooling its vast intelligence apparatus, its labyrinthine spy network spanning the void, its ability to perceive patterns hidden even from the most potent astropathic choirs, pledged unwavering support. The Ordo Xenos would become the vital eyes, the sensitive ears, the terrifying whispers of prescience guiding the Deathwatch, pinpointing festering alien infections before they could erupt into visible plague, and directing the lethal medicine, the kill teams with divine precision to where the cancer demanded excision. This was an alliance forged in desperate, mutual necessity, unique across 10,000 years of imperial strife. It gifted the nascent Deathwatch a terrifyingly rare freedom. While beholden to the strategic will and intelligence provided by the Ordo Xenos, acting swiftly upon their divine tip-offs, the chapter itself retained formidable operational autonomy. The watch captains straining their eyes across tactical holomaps in subterranean command centers, the masters pacing the silent halls of watch fortresses like Malech brooding over ancient lore. These warrior priests commanded untrammeled within their sacred spheres of slaughter. They determined tactics, deployed lances of black-armored wrath, negotiated shiprouts through tidal nightmares, unchallenged, trusted absolutely as the instruments of destruction they were. Only the lodestone, the relentless compass aligning every bolt shell and power sword stroke, remained constant. The Ordo Xenos' intelligence, the first light revealing where true darkness gathered. This precarious, yet indispensable balance, nurtured through centuries, proved a vital necessity as the long vigil metastasized across the sprawling, feverish body of the Imperium. Their theaters of war became ever more complex, nightmares within nightmares, clearing genestealer cults festering within Necron hive cities arising under unsieved asteroid belts, hunting crystalline predators from worlds phasing out of temporal phase amidst WAGH, energy fields supercharged by Eldar psychic ritual, worlds where technology wailed itself alive beneath enigmatic exodite harmonies. They became the ultimate surgical interference units, guardians piercing sealing membranes all others feared to breach, venturing into realms sanity whispered were impassable, learning the barbed intricacies of alien predation in the black labs of annihilation, meticulously excising existentially metastatic threats before their roots could ever pierce, curl around, and crush the vulnerable heartlands squirming under the doubtful light of human worlds. And thus, across the desolate tilt of uncounted centuries, the Deathwatch holds unflinching to the foundational oaths sworn first in the crucible of Corinth's desperate genius, beneath the beast's crushing shadow, and within the shielded dread of the apocryphal conclave on poisoned Oreo's IV. They persevere, tireless in the deliberate darkness, a silent, unbreakable fraternity convergent of the many, forged stronger than metal by terrible secrecy, yet bound indivisibly by a single luminous purpose older than flesh itself. The sacred burden bequeathed to Librarian Galen under Malech's vaults continues, stroke by stroke, etched in ink resonating with unfathomable patience. Watch stations maintain their orbits, vigil lights burning low. Kill teams vanish without fanfare into the texture of forgotten voids. The silent watch endures, an unbroken chain extending backwards into unfathomable sorrow and forwards into an unknown necessitating unwavering, absolute fidelity, the long vigil. The 41st millennium isn't an era of triumph. It's an age of secrets, a thin, fraying line drawn in ash and blood where victories are whispered and sacrifices echo unheard. This, the grim reality of the hidden war waged in shadows, demanded its own champions, its own grim sentinels, the Deathwatch. Their vigil had always been one of silent guardianship, a watch against the horrors beyond the stars, but now it had transformed, twisted by the sheer, suffocating weight of calamity into a desperate struggle for the mere survival of the species they were sworn to protect. The Imperium itself was unraveling, a titan trembling on its foundations amidst cosmic upheaval. The shield of the Deathwatch groaned under a strain unlike any it had ever borne. Humanity faced not one enemy, but an apocalyptic constellation of them, each a unique terror, each pressing in with a ferocity that threatened to drown the light forever. Chaos, the ancient, insidious cancer within, pulsed with renewed, unnatural vigor, its tendrils reaching further, deeper, poisoning souls and worlds from within. And beyond, surrounding the embattled human bastions, the alien. The The sheer, mind-bending otherness of the Xenos pressed upon the fragile borders of mankind's domains, their motives opaque, their hatreds vast and incomprehensible, seizing upon the sudden, gaping vulnerability rent across the galaxy by the Great Rift. That colossal slash through reality, the Cicatrix Maledictum, had broken the Imperium in two, casting billions into forsaken darkness and isolation. Into this chasm of ruin, the Xenos surged with predatory glee, the emissaries of countless nightmares seeking to pick clean the bones of human civilization scattered across the void's endless gulfs. Survival, pure and brutal, had become the core of the Deathwatch's long vigil. The galaxy, that once a great expanse, was now a cauldron where old hatreds boiled over and new monstrosities clawed their way to the surface. Consider the Eldar of Craftworld Alatok, haunted specters clinging fiercely to the memory of their vanished glory. Now, driven by a desperation born of extinction's cold breath, they fought with a fiery resolve unseen for millennia, seeking not merely to endure, but to ignite a final, glorious inferno before their race dwindled into cosmic myth. Their kin, however, the darkly mirrored Drukhari of Komorog, harbored no such aspirations for fleeting splendor. Driven by an insatiable, sadistic hunger, they raided imperial worlds with sickening frequency, descending like carrion birds upon populated planets in devastating crescents of blade-streaked darkness. Their purpose was horrific clarity: slaves. They swept entire populations into the merciless holds of their raiders, sentient chattel destined for the soul-draining tortures of the Dark City, mere sustenance for an appetite that thrived on the suffering of others. Worlds stripped bare of life, emptied save for the echoing cries of the dragged, away the detritus of the Drukhari feast. Yet these savage raids were only a fraction of the terrors gnawing at the shield. From the cold, starlit depths, from worlds scoured clean of memory itself, the Necron dynasty stirred. Their undying legions, warriors forged from unliving metal and ancient, impossible sciences, arose faster than even the Deathwatch's relentless hunters could silence their necropolises. Strike teams descended, eradicated tomb complexes, burned skeletal ranks with holy fire and righteous fury. Yet all too often, it was only a fleeting reprieve. Ancient reanimation protocols, technologies echoing from epochs predating humanity's ascent, stirred the shrapnel and dust, pulling it back together. Warriors rose again, their blank, soulless gaze unflinching, their weapons reloaded, ready to stalk once more towards human worlds. More tombs awakened, more legions marched, their pharaons and overlords rousing from eons of slumber, determined to impose a chilling, silent order upon a galaxy they saw as hopelessly drowned in chaotic madness. And while the Deathwatch strained every sinew, every bolt shell, every tactical reserve they possessed to stem the rising Necronter and Drukhari tides, an older, more brutal menace surged forth with world-shaking force. The Orcs, a green tsunami boiling out of the galactic depths. Their crude, brutal power had always been terrifying, often contained by their own implacable desire to fight each other as fiercely as any enemy. No longer. Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, an orc whose name alone is a planetary death knell, had achieved the well-nigh impossible. He was the war incarnate, the prophet of the twin gods of brutality, Gork and Mork. Under his iron fist and terrifying charisma, vast clans, tribes, and even whole systems of greenskins rallied. They marched not as disparate warbands, but as a unified, colossal WAAGH. A crusade of unparalleled scale that roared across the stars, a tidal wave of muscle, rusted iron, and sheer, anarchic savagery promising to drown entire sectors of the Imperium in a maelstrom of blood, gore, and deafening mayhem. Where they struck, no defensive line held. Fortifications crumbled not just under firepower, but against the suffocating press of bodies, tidal waves of green flesh smashing against battlements with mindless, overwhelming ferocity. The Deathwatch, masters of precision strikes and xenocidal purity, could only watch in grim futility as lone kill teams foundered against such a flood. Theirs was the art of the scalpel wielded against an all-consuming firestorm. To the galactic east, a different kind of peril manifested, colder, quieter, but radiating a menacing, expanding sphere of influence. The Tau Empire. Young, arrogant, technologically audacious, their confidence grew with each passing cycle. Their latest innovation, the ZFR Horizon Accelerator Engine, was a key that unlocked strategic flexibilities unknown to Imperial warp travel. With it, the blue-skinned expansionists probed ever deeper into the fire-forged territory of the Damocles Gulf, encroaching with unnerving ambition. Their aggression was insidious, cloaked in velvet rationality. Where orcs drowned worlds in thunderous extinction, the Tau moved with chilling precision. Worlds didn't fall to conquest, they were seduced, subjugated by patient cultural osmosis and persuasive rhetoric promising the greater good. Populations were swayed not just by fire caste might, but by the water caste's honeyed words of integration and cooperation. Each demure advance, each world shifted imperceptibly into the Tau sphere, brought the emblems of the Sept worlds ever closer to the Imperial heart. The Deathwatch, understanding the slow bleed this represented, launched lightning assaults wherever possible, attempting to cauterize the threat instantly, ruthlessly. Every reclaimed world felt less like victory and more like the desperate draining of finite strength, a precious shard of humanity's dwindling power spent merely to hold back a tide that advanced with patient, terrible logic. And then, blanketing it all, swallowing entire stars in its silent, implacable hunger, came the greatest silence, the hive mind, the Tyranids, the great devourer. Its approach was less an invasion, more the incremental creep of cosmic ecology vanishing under a tide of claws and gnawing mouths. An extragalactic swarm conducting a symphony of annihilation whose scale rendered sentient strategy almost pitiable. Bioships, mountains of chitin and teeth sailing the void on incomprehensible impulses, pressed infinitely forward. This insatiable hunger defined them utterly, a single purpose driving trillions upon trillions of organisms towards consumption. Hive Fleet Behemoth and its successor, the cunning Kraken, led this foreshadowing thrust into the Segmentum Ultima. Their ravenous tendrils scoured life from planets with terrifying efficiency, leaving only barren, gray-husked silent graves orbiting dead stars. Yet, amongst the nightmares swimming in the Emperordom void, it was Hive Fleet Leviathan that truly froze the blood in the veins of the Deathwatch. Emerging not from the rim, but from the terrifying, warped depths beneath the galactic core, this Leviathan threatened Segmentum Pacificus, a dagger poised against Segmentum Solar itself, Sol, Terra, the sacred heart pulsing weakly still. Every sacrifice made to dent its advance merely revealed more biomass hurled into the maw, consuming refordered regiments. Entire fleet scuttles burned space wrecks feeding the swarm. The grim calculus whispered within the Watch fortress, not whether victory was possible, but how long containment could be maintained before Terra itself felt the shadow fall upon Sol Gate. How long before even the Watch captain broke, shoulders slumped under the weight of holding back Oblivion epic by grueling epic. Each passing Terran year felt like another turn of some celestial garrote slowly constricting about humanity's throat. Reinforcements became a constant, desperate plea, the Deathwatch invoking ancient blood oaths sworn by the chapters of the Adeptus Astartes to provide warriors for the long vigil. Yet in this bleak hour, the tide flowed bitterly against them. Many chapters, bleeding white on crumbling battlefields across a million worlds, besieged themselves, perceived the endless sacrificial demands, began the unthinkable. They formally petitioned for the release of their brothers serving the Watch. They needed every blade, every Geneforged warrior, back to defend their own ancestral homes, their own dwindling fiefdoms, placing lineage above the shared shield. It was a fracture of honor, a shard of shame driven into the heart of fraternity by the grinding teeth of extinction itself. The chapters silently acknowledged the dishonor, yet still they pleaded. Each unreturned battle brother potentially represented the flickering hope of survival for their own doomed world. The long vigil faltered, its guardians overextended. Each Deathwatch kill team descending through atmospheric fire was not merely warriors, they were symbols of last, desperate defiance. Finite actions against the infinite dark. Finite promises bought with finite lives, not victory perhaps but time. Precious, agonizing moments harvested inch by crimson inch against encroaching annihilation. Yet even their vaunted strength shattered against the overwhelming calculus. Too many enemies. Too many fires raging across the void. They embodied the Imperium's plight, stretched impossibly thin, struggling to hold back a galaxy tearing itself apart by monstrous outsiders and its own cancerous, insidious fears. Impossible choices were not abstract politics anymore. They were the daily rations of command. It had always been a grim theater of brutal reality, this galaxy, but never had the curtains drawn so tightly closed upon such encompassing gloom as they did when the Imperial fleets translated into the fire-scarred outskirts of the Allure system. Venner, the War of the Beast. A conflict remembered now only by historians and mourners alike. The crucible where humanity's strength was tested to its absolute limits, precariously held together by a grand coalition, fracturing beneath the sheer pressure of relentless assault. The cleaving point would be Allure Prime. The planet once bleached rock became synonymous with humanity's precarious control, barely clinging to its own existence, after centuries of attrition warfare against an uprising primordial alien savagery that defied comprehension. The first battle revealed vulnerabilities everyone hoped were myths, asymmetry in warfare defying imperial tactical logic hardened across millennia of strife. Overwatch fell to the brooding, ironclad presence of Lord Commander Karand, a mind honed against impossible odds, alongside a legend in flesh, the Primarch Vulcan himself. Yet Vulcan, revered remnants of a mythical past layered fragmented stitched truths whispered around dying campfires, proved inscrutable even among such colossal threats. Taciturn, cloaked in a self-imposed isolation far heavier than mere physical armor, Primarch Vulcan retreated into fortress of his own thoughts aboard the Alcazar Remembered, the venerable battle barge squadron flagship belonging to the Fist's exemplar chapter. His grim presence was a mystery hanging thick over the assembled might of the Crusade fleet, silent judgment radiating from every echoing chamber of the massive vessel, none daring to break it, the commanders quietly whispering reassurances that his wisdom would definitively shape their actions when most required, trusting this godlike vision could resolve the impasse facing them near annihilation. Faith in the Primarch was their bedrock when Allure Prime bloomed in the distance viewports, now a monument sculpted anew by crushing Orc insignificance topped twisted apex brutality itself. What they witnessed stole the breath of hardened veterans. Orbital cursors flickered over imagery revealing orb not generally understood reciting planet ecosystems at all. Sprawling industrial hellscape layered grotesquely over its Onsabaran rock face. Brutal settlement patterns woven together by rusted bridges, teetering scaffolding, cities tangled chaotic dark metal spiderweb expanding across continents like cancerous growth. Violent greens rapidly replacing planetary geological organized rhythm thrumming grotesque activity, concentrated thick within its core capital erection dominating atmosphere. Orcs' tended arteries pumping energizing filth continuously below deep subterranean levels, amplifying planetary defenses. Then Imperial weapons impacting atmospheric demarcation, explosions above dense settled area, flared instantly popped like vapor bubbles against a flickering sheen, disintegrating terrible energies ghostly greens washing across shield hemisphere, reminiscent of veins pumping viscous fluids beneath dark shell encasements, swallowing planetary mass entire like mucous membrane cocoon. Allure Prime stood impregnated within energies radiating vicious pulse, intermittently reminiscent neural spark bursts firing within giant organism, crushing any hope softening regiments hostile landing zones, prior ground assault launched blind regardless throwing finest Imperial soldiers, avowed warriors into collapsing meat grinder, beneath grotesque orbital defenses thunderous rainfare rained fire explosives throwing landing craft, to base scrap metal creating landing zones anywhere remotely. Near intended landing coordinates impossible wall-to-wall fortifications, greeted space marines, storming choke points, explosively collapsing barricades instantly mass assault began. From the moment Imperial boots touched blasted rockcrete, chaos had its jaws wide open. Each step forward announced arrival passengers within preordained massacre map, dictated Orc cunning disciplines, simultaneously invisible cohesive machine, whirring beneath overt primitive bloodlust. Seas of green-clad forms poured seemingly teleported into position, wherever advance steadied into movement corridors, momentarily cleared eerily freed rubble, instantaneously exploded underfoot, burying dozens premature clearing ramp, abruptly collapsed casualties, plunging into pits crude meltatraps, disintegrating entire squads mid-charge barbed wire spring traps gutting guardsmen, flailing helplessly exposed surface suddenly sprouting crude flak batteries, hidden foundations heavily. Fortified overlooking strategic high ground, terrain simultaneously venting smoke chimneys, spewing acrid pungent fuel vapors, choking detached, comlinks shrieking overlapping emergency frequencies, overwhelming Vox coordinators, all layered relentless background cacophony shrieking wag H-cries reverberated of stone metal, equally rendering Vox commands unintelligible orchestrated madness, formed core orc strategy retreat consolidation, impossibly managed forced carnage. Grotesque machines grated tearing across broken earth vomiting thick smoke, indiscriminately adding bitter sickness pungency battlefield stench agony burning promethium, fused bodily odors transforming atmosphere tangible killing mist. From every conceivable vantage, drop pod broken spire crumbling walkway chained tower blocks against paint-smeared skies, in chaotic multitudes flooded down colossal assault waves. Garrock name was whispered later casualty briefings, planetary capital coalescing perfect fortress cityscape, for mind-twisting orc brutal brilliance layered gangways and twisted avenues, forming chain brutal kill zones Imperial shock columns, channeled predictably towards death zones, mapped long before footsteps dared approaching vicinity Imperial command bunker progressing. Harand managed temporal buffer marshalling frontline, cohesion impossible circumstances, rallied successor chapters galaxy, renowned blood angels, flamboyant nobility tempering precision grim resolve hovering controlled fury between them salamanders, fire fear-lit isolated firewalls clearing desperate retreat paths, alongside stoic endurance fists exemplar legacies Dornline formation discipline, utterly indispensable dark angels symbols containment, prepared apocalyptic defense. Protocols simultaneously gathering unforeseen magnitude space wolves, Proxies Fenris, vibrating untamed murderous urge snarled fighting retreat columns, falling back consolidating defenses trenches, pushed deep protective steel overlapping wreckage harvested barricaded choke points, blocking advancing greenskin tide numbers, overwhelming batter relentless hammer blows regiments Astra Militarum poured. Upon planetary field, once stalwart formations, evaporated annihilation, decimated casualties. Approached 80% loss rate front, encountered glistening, obscenely Legio Skidara cohorts marching relentless precision, met crumbling necrotizing swarms, cyborg warriors, shattered scrap metal explosions, sentinel walkers, crushed beneath stomping cannon platforms, violence unseen, wave horror titan legions entered battle, making terrible mark-breaking stalemates against towering orc counterwalkers iron brute clashes, erupted decimating city districts titan legio temerius walk towering. God's War discharging volley annihilating artillery waves, mutated Gargant equivalents, returning fire magnitudes destruction, cracked air blast, affects shrapnel hurricanes sweeping entire earthbreaker sequences, ripping foundation supports collapsing umber brick fortresses crushing defenders, attackers indiscriminately pressure, remained impossible driven relentlessly Heartgarok formidable layered defenses, guarded temple gork mork towering construct dominating landscape, equidistant passages. Leading converging corridors pushing unbeatable army into impending slaughter space cord edge, forced closed space directly embracing trap, perfectly designed core tactical masterpiece greenskin strategist, Karand eventually recognized true cost advances, appalling unsustainable when tactic clear, drove relentlessly certain doom sacrifice whole expeditionary force, achieving nothing if they continued towards continuous decapitation strategy surrounding planet. Insight arrived hand accompanied legendary assassin, Eshed Wire Venom Temple agent infiltration, presenting chilling intelligence near death, barely escaping impossible odds, encountering real beast not lone monstrous fluke entire inner sanctum, overflowed gathered warbosses armored dark steel, adorned battle trophies grotesque glyphs swirling energies guarded supreme profane deity coalesced command, throne focus unimaginable forces, lurking beneath planet skin behind him like silent sentinel stood. Prehistoric superstructure, mega gargant leering vision over battlefield destruction, premise solitude demanding strike false presumption security, assembled forces, rendered assassination suicide, retreat enacted coercing stunned flyer, crashed near Imperial line, revealing devastating truth. Inside troop carrier, assaulted assimilating knowledge Karand instantly pivoted entire theater war orders, transmitted rapid burst communication planetary bombardment, ceased immediately targeting shifted planetary landscape orbital fire, concentrated exclusively supply lines, barely functional arterial roads, fat-packed fungus, vats farms arteries sludge fields, barely organic gruel orc sustenance, required staggering biologies, mass impossible feeding population, threatening collapse consumed. Everything humans enslaved tribes, brutally processed barbaric feast nights escalation cannibalism, extending mere clans, provided strategic weakness amid brutal strength burden, collapse critical breaking, entire WAAGH functionality dependent constant consumption cessation, would trigger inevitable rupture aggressive response theater siege tactics, Great Ogre, forced mobile conflict advantageous imperial battle doctrines, starving greenskin promised lever Karand calculated drawing. Beast rage pushing defensive seculsion, breaking mighty sortie engagements imperial orders, barked regiments redirected engineers, scrounging Armageddon debris assembling functional ordinatus weapon monstrosity battlefield improvisation, salvaged chassis capital imperial crashed transport, fixed onto heretical plasma accelerator, seized vessel, discarded millennia technological secrets, bolted jury-rigged field ordnance monstrous assemblage, forged necessity ingenuity madness, unleashed sequences. Deafening energies rupturing advancing tides, greenskins vaporized raw plasma torrents, carving corridors, temporary resets, fury receding temporarily, like pulled fist back larger impact building. Battlefield dipped pause noise lingering horror, printed muttered relief commanders coordinated artillery, abundant ammunition, reserves poured targeted orc advances channeled predictable routes crushing explosions momentarily halted cluster, assaults momentary victories, evaporating under renewed screams advancing second wave hammer blow correlating precisely strategic diversion, worked horrifying perfection. Orcs poured Garok cosmic fury, summarized unending wall hot molten blood, Hulk flesh rusted weapons mountains, adamantium fury roars, shaking bedrock, orchestrated percussion, destroying balance, human formations, defensive titans, advanced legio ultima repurposed ordinatus battering, brute magnificent skirmishes, living giants gargants emerged multitude, responding earth shakers disgorged planet depths, larger engineering marvels, than ever observed previously horrifying conflict escalated. Unimaginable scale warhounds darting amidst stomping wargargants, stomping, crushing, smashing imperial titans, unleashing volleys, cracking armor titanic scale, Megablasts peel walker skins, discharge gravitic distortions, collapse structural integrity macrocannons, wounding Legio Titans, while Mechanicum lines fled, collapsing, attempting salvage battle rituals. Waves surged like flooding sea, breaching defending walls, streaming across mud-soaked, charred earth, meeting guardsmen, desperate rifle barrage scan. Meters cite heroic charges, orchestrated commissars, evaporating instantly, armor crushed like beetles beneath hooves, screams silenced, swamp mass, unstoppable momentum, advancing implacably, demolition, designed ordnance struggled, hold line breach, inevitable superficial wounding, colossal army center, exactly core fortress began move. Impossible tremor rippled entire planet, trembling intensity escalating towards crescendo, siren scream, primal roaring, clarity audible distinctly, planet groaned. Towering temple, gork mork, colossal juggernaut, obstacle spine, garok, city gigantic, sacred structure, sprawling geodesic nightmare, split seams, multiple levels, unfurling layers, collapsing adjacent structures, steel girders, ripped reinforced concrete, shattering, revealing underlying impossible architecture mechanisms, strange angles, awkward protrusions, sphincters, metallic grinding extensions, unfolding outwards, unfolding upwards, backwards, grid transformation, accelerating, shifting monument. Newly realized monstrous engine, staggeringly enormous, dwarfing Titan units, destroying nearby Titan Legio Ultima chassis, toppling, recoiling, immense smoke, shimmering veil settling, revealing emerged engine annihilation, signify true nature, star fortress, fundamental error assessment, ingrained Imperial mindset, edge terror realization, freezing blood commanders, tactica, display screens, garish impossible silhouette looming, swallowed diminutive human forms, nearby Titans, reeling stagger, skilled weight, sheer mass. Felt gravitational distortions, planetary orbit, calculate, pinpoint fire, would struck, soaking defensive void shields like raindrops. Entire structure meticulously planned ploy, constructed, engineered monument, singular purpose war. Onga Megagant had awakened. Containing weapon cores capable rending fleet systems entire. Garrison your bastions, smashed insignificant debris, divination scholars, recounted omens, dread construction schema, theoretical insanity, consolidation. Orc levels, previously unknown technological blasphemy, unfolding stark terror, crush hope, beneath unmovable metal incarnation, impossible nightmare reality, shifted arena, hopeless shadows, long consumed, few remaining thoughts. Will annihilation rule beyond redemption? Final measure stood, impossible resolve, determined fortress shake despite insignificance. Will extinction was momentary hold, fragile existence, required remaining seconds, fought eternities, defeating overwhelming shadow. Necessity demanded activating every redundant protocol. Denial, total surrender, enacted commands, chain ceased, registering imminent collision, field terminal junction, launch simultaneously, echoing roar, stalled, inevitably doom, engine battle, trumpet announcement, singular phrase, broadcast static, manually overrode every experienced life, aggressive signal, Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, forces, Space Marines, Legio Titans, tanks, gunships, raw infantry, blade sent, exhausting, sprinting hopelessly towards configuration, catastrophe. Final truth emerged, universally confront. Allure Prime was core, simultaneously gigantic war engine, gargant, unleashed, mutually entombed anchors, planeticidal ignition, reaching crescendo battle vener, becoming arena, planetary execution. No. Operation Resilience recalled acceptable loss thresholds, swiftly recalculated, pushing vast diminishing empire reserves, spilled soil counter, never knowing just when confrontation seemed physical manifestation, despair, legend, Primarch Vulcan, became visible, eternally silent periphery, strode fortress vision, hellscape, overwhelmed battlefield presence, tangible shift, atmosphere, radiating implacable resolve, walked alone. Towards impossible propulsion, indifferent destruction, silent chance, strength, determined form, demands preparation, certain confrontation, arrived, incalculable cost projection. Future-dependent outcome, unfolding seconds, annihilation, pulse engine charged downwards, firing sequence, initiated, unstoppable rolling towards, assigned vectors, total oblivion, projected wide vital coordinates, bombardment, commenced crashing deflector shields, momentarily shimmering, capture waste energy, against mass cancellation, directing inconsequential, consumed, protecting crucial structure, Titan war groups, desperately firing onto slowly advancing weapon, unable scratch, adamantium, hide armor. Hardened past Imperial science, weapon began slow descent, ground beneath, buckling, collapsing, swallowed entire WAAGH elements, rushed between crushing massive engine feet, ruthlessly crushing fallen, attempting retreat seconds, felt eternities, produced vague recall, visual confirmation, managed shadow, descending, despairing Vulcan path, realized simultaneously, final realization, imprinted command structure, Vulcan, intended intercept, unpredictable path, highest risk possible moment, direction. Units responding, unprecedented activation contingencies, previously dormant, began activate perimeter defense. Array's crossfire calculated to divert trajectory shield forward assault onto untested engine-susceptible pathways. Praying calculate seconds remained impossible maneuver. Succeeding Vulcan stride continued impossible speed engine demolition charges. Exploding uselessly biggest device yells. Confirmed larger weapon pulse movement. Accelerated closing connection unavoidable. Inevitable outcome horror sending vibrations noticeable orbit terrifying seconds. Justice demanded. Incredible orbital scale strategic movement precision. Engines switched artificial gravity wells. Megagant unexpected tilt. Rerouting massive weapon. Impossibly off-axis firing energy beam tearing space orbit trail. Vaporized plasma consuming flank Titanic engine shrugging. Off damaged technician scream analysis chain reaction. Unleashed causing internal containment breaches overlapping kinetic fields. Destabilized generating catastrophic cascade effect entire Gargant. Shook violently burst gigantic. Explosions reverberated planetary axis ear-shattering vibrations. Stratospheric levels. Collapsing shield hemisphere chaotic energies. Shriek dissipated planetary atmosphere torn lightning. Flickers surface fissures. Open miles across consuming fortresses battlefield. Instantly layers primary weapon system. Reigniting faint shimmer dyed permanent darkness. Overcame planetary defense network silence echoed. Across galaxy surface, debris raining aftermath Vulcan remained visible field battlefield. Smoking crater aligned path sacrificed Titan Life's core generator. Past future secured price unfathomable retreat order. Formal signaling conclusion months battle concluding victory sacrifice measure. Rendered supreme reality vicarious campaign shifted towards bloody stabilization recovery phases. Began simultaneously death toll calculations. Continued standard centuries. Forgetting imminent extinction. Postponed successfully enacted holding enemy core operating theater. Barely. For Deathwatch, implications echoed starkly. Resources stretched further demands escalated strategic reserve, exhausted replacements impossibility. Loom ever larger conclusions, terrifying reached realm survival teetering, edge razors threshold perpetual instant calamity, accepted horizon imminent collapse reality, began slow dissolution inevitable. Grim millennial endured. The air itself screamed, thick with ozone and scorched metal, as the gargantuan war machine, a titanic orc construct of riveted insanity, unleashed pulsing waves of raw psychic fury from its multi-story glowing eyes. It rained like a god of destruction upon the buckling Imperial lines, each colossally swung limb-sending men, armored tanks, and even embattled Artie's carts tumbling like discarded toys. Imperial cohesion shattered under the relentless onslaught, wave after wave of greenskin fury fueled by the monstrous engine's psychic storm. In this final, desperate hour, Vulcan, the Salamander's Primarch, strode onto the field, a bastion of adamantium resolve amidst crumbling hope. His orders were absolute, a last roll of the dice. Every available Thunderhawk and Stormbird stripped bare of armor plating save for reinforced ramps, overloaded with the grim remnants of Shattered Astartes Company's nearly 3,000 Space Marines, condensed into a single, defiant aerial fist. They ascended into the firelit sky, a swarm of steel beetles against the Gargant's mountainous silhouette, their engines whining defiance as they streaked towards colossal doom. Reaching the outer hull was like plunging into a living forge. Twisted girders spewed steam, crude hydraulic pipes burst scalding fluid, and an infernal clamor of clanking, grinding machinery filled the cavernous interior, punctuated by the guttural roars and heavy footfalls of the orc stompers swarming within. Vulcan led the charge, wielding his Warhammer Udricandle with terrifying skill, cutting through smoke, fire, and greenskin flesh alongside his warriors. Each corridor cleared, each ambush repulsed, led them deeper, drawn inevitably towards the central chamber, the core beating with the foul lifeblood of the Megagargant and the vile intelligence that puppeteered it. At last, stumbling through choking fumes into a vast subterranean sanctum, the heart of the beast lay before them. Dominating the cavernous space stood a looming idol of an orc, a towering effigy in battered metal, utterly still and imposing. Then with an earth-shattering roar that vibrated the deck plates, the idol moved. It was not stone, but the architect of terror himself, clad in his suit of mega armor, a rusted monstrosity rivaling even an Imperial battle titan in sheer bulk and menace. Vulcan faced the nightmare made flesh. Here was the fiend who had twisted technology into abomination, slaughtered chapter masters Kadra and Odenathus, and promised the final doom he gleefully wrought for humanity. The beast laughed, a deep, guttural sound thick with pure malice, spitting curses in ragged, contemptible Gothic, mocking the Emperor, mocking the Imperium's inevitable fall. Vulcan offered no reply save for a roar of his own, Warhammer held high as he surged forward. The clash was titanic. Astartes' resilience met orc ferocity amplified to godlike proportions. Hammer blows struck sparks like miniature supernovae against the beast's impossibly tough armor, each impact echoing like peals of thunder in the confined space. Tearing metal, venting power conduits gushed arcs of eldritch energy that danced across the walls, transforming the sanctum into an unstable lightning storm. Vulcan felt the beast's terrifying strength, each parry shaking his bones, each near miss a hurricane passing by. His own blows, landing with Primarch force, barely dented the dizzying resilience of the warlord's plates. He saw the only path, a spark of comprehension amidst the storm of violence. True death for the beast demanded absolute sacrifice. To Corvan, his trusted captain, must pass the mantle. Vulcan would be the price. With a final command that echoed above the apocalypse, Vulcan ordered the withdrawal. His warriors hesitated, their Primarch's intent a physical agony worse than bolter shells, but discipline held. As the surviving salamanders fell back, Vulcan dug deep, drawing not just upon his immense physical reserves but the volcanic core of his being, the fury of Nocturne itself channeled into his hammer. He roared a challenge that transcended language, the clarion call of humanity's defiance. His final strike wasn't just aimed at the beast. It drove the head of Udrikandel deep into the structure of the power generator, humming malevolently beside the warlord. The detonation was instantaneous, a blossom of pure, annihilating light erupting from the core of the Megagargant. It consumed Vulcan and the beast whole, collapsing the cavern in a firestorm that vaporized metal and flesh. Nothing remained. When the smoke and radioactive dust finally began to settle, revealing only smoldering ruins where the mountain of the Gargant once stood, the orcs witnessed the disappearance of their god of war. Their monumental brawl drive shattered into terrified confusion. The surviving Imperial forces, shattered bodies mirroring shattered spirits, pulled back from Ulener's blood-soaked earth. They carried the crushing weight of Pyrrhic victory. The beast was dead, but so was the fireborn Vulcan, a light extinguished. The journey back to Terra was silent, a vast sepulchre in space filled only by the hum of damaged drives and the pall of profound, chilling loss. Then, as the fleet neared Sol, a terrible sound echoed grimly across every voxcaster, every command bridge, every flickering pick screen on every Imperial vessel in station. A crude, infinitely amplified orc chant bellowed with infernal glee into the void. I am slaughter, I am slaughter, I am slaughter. It was in the ominous shadow between the butchery of the first battle for Ulener and the dread preparations for the second that the seeds of the Deathwatch took root. History often obscures desperate origins. Accounts coalesced later, but the grim truth lay in utter necessity. The beast's horde hadn't been crushed. It retreated, consolidated, and returned stronger, empowered by a rogue attack moon reactivated somewhere in the void near Terra. Their numbers were seemingly inexhaustible, ground armies impossibly vast. Worse, their power was changing, morphing. The orcs exhibited terrifying burgeoning psychic might, crude but devastatingly effective warp energies flickering around their weird boys and permeating the WAAGH. Itself, a power lord Commander Corvus Corax could not match with conventional tactics, no matter the bravery of his soldiers. Brawn alone was futile. Against this grotesque apocalypse, desperately seeking an edge finer than armored fists and lance batteries, Corax turned to the unorthodox, scraping the very bottom of salvation's barrel. He crafted a plan fraught with risk, potentially catastrophic folly, fighting psychic fire not with water, but with an inversion of the abyss itself, seeking ancient, forbidden keys. Veritas arrived then, a shadow within shadows, the enigmatic inquisitorial representative steeped in the stale parchments of forgotten imperial protocols. He whispered secrets, cryptic knowledge spoken in hushed tones thick with implication, the Sisters of Silence. Not legends, but potentially extant, ostracized warrior nuns, null maidens bearing the pariah gene, anathema to all psychic resonance. Hunted, exiled to the galaxy's frozen rim, these were the Emperor's ancient witch hunters, once his blade against the ruinous powers during the Great Crusade. Their presence, Veritas asserted, was walking silence, an antisoul that snuffed psychic energy, turning raging pyromancers and gibbering warp-twisted horrors into shuddering lumps of terrified flesh. He claimed he alone held knowledge of their last refuge on the desolate, gravity-racked world of Neris. Corax wasted no moment. Battleships screamed across the Segmentum Pacificus, warp drives pushed beyond tolerances, arriving at Neris to find the planet wreathed in war's foul breath. The Sisters' hidden sanctuary was besieged, strangely, by orc hordes themselves, perhaps sensing an instinctual, primal terror directed at the soulless nulls. Imperial forces ground into the greenskin cordon in relentless, bloody assaults, shattering the crude siege lines. Breaking through, Corax finally stood before the Order's leader amidst their austere, fortified cloisters. Hope curdled into cold disappointment. Their eyes were flinty, armored in millennia of calcified resentment, cast out, abandoned, hunted by the very Imperium they had bled to protect. Why should they bleed further for an empire that spat on their sacrifice? Their loyalty, fierce and unbroken, was to the Emperor, not the corrupt edifice built upon his absence. Corax met their bitter pride. Without grand speeches, he invoked the only name potent enough to challenge ingrained loss: Vulcan, the Primarch's blessing bestowed upon this desperate campaign. Like striking flint on stone, that name ignited a spark. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but remembrance. Duty rekindled through the invocation of a brother lost saving from the beast they now faced. Reluctantly, grimly, the sisters assented. The plan unfolded with terrible ingenuity. Across multiple worlds, industrial Idala Plague regions choked with promethium smoke, ice-locked Valhalla, where frost mingled with spilled blood, covert Imperial kill teams hunted not orc warlords, but their weirdboys. Capturing these writhing psychics alive was its own special hell. Delivered under heavy guard to secret staging grounds, the weirdboys became living batteries, catalysts for Corax's grand, monstrous gamble. He and the sisters prepared to unleash a psychic backlash, a bomb made from the enemy's own stolen power and the absolute silence of pariahs. The proving ground chosen was the volcanic hellscape of Incus Maxima. As a vast orc WAGH surged towards Imperial barricades, drunk on their own burgeoning psychic might, the Imperial plan triggered. The bound weirdboys convulsed, their captured energies viciously stimulated, and then brutally channeled outwards directly against the oncoming psychic tide of their brethren. The effect wasn't chaos, it was sheer screaming cancellation. It was a wave of null disruption amplified through the orc Gestalt field. Where the two forces met, psychic storm meeting psychic null, a devastating feedback loop erupted, tearing through the green ranks. Orcs screamed, clutching their heads as if skulls were splitting, psychic mechanisms sputtered and died, Gargants stumbled, weirdboys exploded in showers of gore. The horde descended into a disoriented, terrified rabble, easily broken. It worked. Against impossible odds, Corax's madness bore terrible fruit. Emboldened, hearts hardened by a new kind of savage hope, the Imperials converged for the second, final strike on Ullener. The assembled Crusade force was smaller, a scarred claw of the Onsamite First Expedition. Predominantly Astartes, grim black Templars hungry for righteous fury, ferocious blood angels masking sorrow beneath noble savagery, stoic Iron Knights, wolvish space wolves, and a dozen other battered chapters, their honor stained and demanding redemption. Alongside marched the hardened veterans of the Astra Militarum, the zealous Fraterus Templar, the implacable Legio Cybernetica Constructs, the towering lances of Imperial Knights stepping with predatory grace, and the scarred Wargod Walkers of Legio Ultima Titans. Hovering on the edges, almost unseen, were the Sisters of Silence, their cloaked forms radiating chilling void, a gathering storm of anti-empathic disruption. This crucible of desperation forged a new blade, the Deathwatch. Born not in triumph, but in response to catastrophic losses, these were the elite of surviving Astartes chapters, formed into specialist kill teams, not a hammer, but a surgeon's scalpel, aimed to strike precisely while the body still bled. With the Imperial Navy decimated, commandeer the ancient, grim black ships of the Inquisition itself to ferry the vanguard forces. The twisted journey culminated in orbit over Ullener. Command lay with Corax, supported by Corland of the Fist's Exemplar and the steely inquisitorial representative Yandros. Yet Corax himself would lead the dagger thrust, a hand-picked assassination team tasked with plunging into the monster's heart, the fortress capital of Gargrod. There reigned the beast. Black Templar High Marshal Bohemond radiated zealous fervor. Deathwatch Chapter Master Assant Warfist embodied lethal efficiency. A six-man kill team led by Raven Guard Sergeant Tyrus mastered stealth. Imperial assassins like Errata Vertis embodied swift death. Skidare Ranger Alpha 13 Jelil represented calculated precision. Commissar Heliad Gus brought iron discipline. The Sisters of Silence contingent under Knight Abyssal Cavalin Brasses emanated frozen stillness. And two hulking Astartes designated simply, the Aenian twins provided an anvil of raw biotic power. The initial assault was swift, brutal, sacrificial. Crumbling Imperial warships, crewed by the damned, were flung like burning spears into Gargrod's pulsing energy shield. The shield flickered wildly under multiple colossal impacts, its immense power momentarily overloaded, collapsing sections just long enough. Corax's team vanished in the coruscating blast of teleportation, materializing within the malodorous, cavernous guts of Gargrod's capital fortress. The energy shield snapped back instantly behind them, sealing their fate within the beast's gullet. Trapped. Outside, the Imperial fleet, believing the shield breach permanent, committed. Swarms of cunningly hidden orc rocks and battlecruisers erupted from ambush positions, savaging the supporting fleet. The trap was sprung, sacrifice demanded even in the endeavor. No turning back. Corax drove his team forward through corridors layered with crude orc ambushes and booby traps, a relentless push towards the throne room. Reports had trickled back from survivors, improbable, terrifying whispers. The beast was alive. Vulcan's sacrifice had been noble but incomplete. The warlord had survived. They breached the throne chamber, a barbarous cathedral of skulls and scorched metal. At its far end loomed 6 immense, grotesque thrones, draped in the flayed banners of conquered worlds, encrusted with trophies of bone and rusted plate. Upon one lurked the figure of nightmares, impossibly vast, clad in monstrous mega armor, radiating primal WAGH, power, the beast. Sentinel around it, casting colossal shadows, stood its honor guard gargants tall as imperial reaver titans, walking abattoirs bristling with crude firepower, an insurmountable wall of scrap iron and malice. The battle erupted with volcanic ferocity. Corax and his agents fought with the desperate savagery of cornered beasts. Bohemon's blade sang hymns of divine wrath. Assassin toxins filled veins. Bolter fire sparked uselessly against the beast's armor. Bombs deflected by sheer force. The Gargants crushed corners of the chamber under their tread. It was hopeless. The beast mocked their futile efforts. As despair began to coil cold fingers around Corax's heart, the Sisters of Silence stepped forward. Knight Abyssal Brasses raised her hand, a silent command. Their pariah fields manifested simultaneously, a wave of soul-deafening silence crashing against the roaring psychic torrent emanating from the beast and his horde connection. The effect was catastrophic disruption. The beast recoiled physically, its psychic resonance stuttered. The supporting orcs nearby shrieked in utter psychic agony, clutching their heads, staggering. The incredibly durable armor didn't crack, but the controlling will behind it faltered. That fleeting moment, Corax saw it. Leveraging the destabilization, drawing on every atom of his commander's resolve and Astartes' genocrafted ability, he unleashed a final furious assault, a furious, focused storm of blows raining upon the beast during that crystalline second of vulnerability. At last, the gargantuan orc warlord teetered, then crashed to the deck like a felled tree, its armor rent, life extinguished. Relief, sharp and painful, flooded the survivors. It was done. Until the shadows behind the largest throne shifted. A shape emerged, larger still, impossibly bigger, armored in identical, terrifying plate. Another beast. Laughter, colder and crueler than the vanquished creatures, boomed through the chamber. Corax stood frozen, comprehension like ice water in his veins. Not one beast. Primes, multiple, identical nightmares. The new warlord moved with shocking speed, obliterating thought. His power claw closed around Corax, the hero of Ullanor, the last of Raven's lineage, and crushed that legendary figure into ruin. The mission dissolved into desperate extraction. Grief fought with survival as the crippled assassination force recovered Corax's shattered remains, fighting their way back through corridors choked with orcs recovering from the psychic shock. The Deathwatch had been unleashed. They had penetrated the heart of hell and confirmed the target slain, proving their potential ruthlessly. Yet the mission ended in abject retreat and the death of the commander who forged them. The next grim echo emanating from the dread annals, a dirge alongside the orc chant, came from Damnos. This world, an imperial mining outpost nestled in the Ultima Segmentum, held a secret concealed beneath mountains of extracted ore and colonist ignorance long after the Emperor mourned. It was not merely habitable rock, it was a tomb world. The ancient Necron dynasty slept there, entombed in stasis crypts until imperial ignorance, some whispered recklessness, activated the deadly slumberers. The Second Battle of Damnos itself was a nadir long prophesied by the first catastrophic engagements in 974 M41, where entire Astra Militarum regiments vanished into disintegration fields, and even the vaunted Ultramarines' Second Company tasted humiliating, bloody defeat. The silence from the Inquisition about this ancient nightmare shattered faith. News of humanity's defeat spread like slow poison through the Imperium, a chilling counterpoint to the orc threat. It proved humanity was not supreme. Its grip was tenuous, threatened not just by the brute force of orcs, but by the ancient, inexorable, bone-chilling precision of soulless pharaonic machines, waking from eons of slumber unseen beneath their very feet. The losses on Damnos weren't just soldiers, they were confidence itself, sparking dread whispers on Terra and Mars that rolled like thunder beneath the foundations of galactic dominion. A stark reminder within the choking fog of war that annihilation took many forms, and no sacrifice could buy eternal security. I am slaughter set the stars trembling, and the whispers from the tombs promised brittle days to come. The cold command flowed down from Terra itself, a decree etched in adamantine finality, a demand no longer deferred. Damnos, that festering wound upon the Imperium's honor and a dire shadow upon its security, could be disregarded no more. The Ultramarines, sons of the Primarch Robot Guilliman, were summoned back to that frozen, accursed world they had once fled, charged with reclaiming the irradiated wasteland and banishing the soulless Necron legions from the Emperor's stars forever. There was no appeal, no path of negotiation. The very honor of the Avenging Sun's lineage and the survival of the Segmentum itself screamed for retribution, screamed for victory spelled in the crimson ink of war. Yet Chapter Master Marnius Calgar, a titan amongst men, felt the crushing weight settle upon his augmetic shoulders. His seasoned soul, tempered across centuries of unceasing conflict, knew this path back to the icy plains was paved with sacrifice, a route carved uphill through impossible odds, promising a gruesome spectacle of broken ceramite and expired Geneforged life. A quarter-century of galactic standard time had crawled past since the Ultramarines tasted the bitter ashes of that first defeat, centuries during which the Necrons beneath Damno's crust had not lain dormant. Their strength would have swelled, engines laboring in the abyssal dark to awaken countless more immortals from eons of stasis, dragging horrors untouched by time into the grim present. Calgar's mind was a grim tally, the faces of brothers he would send into the grinding teeth of the enemy, the legion he might bid farewell to forever, hundreds of the Emperor's finest warriors potentially reduced to names inscribed upon sorrow-laden ossuaries. Yet the weight of duty, centuries heavy, pressed down. The pride of Ultramar itself, that smoldering ember refusing to be extinguished by shame, demanded Damno's be confronted, the ghost of failure exorcised from its blasted earth and frozen peaks. Calgar roused the legions, his voice resonating through the hollowed-out space of vast mobilization chambers. Warriors from the vaunted 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th companies stood ready. There will now his clay. Elements of the 7th and 10th companies added their hardened strength, assembling a formidable host exceeding 500 Astartes, each a blue-armored demigod sworn to their lord's command. Among them stalked Cato Sicarius, captain of the 2nd, a burning specter. Damno's was his failure, a thorn eternally driven deep into his psyche, poisoning his every triumph since that day. Now, driven by a near-obsessive zeal that bordered on possession, Sicarius trained. His movements were lightning encased in ceramite, every drill, every simulated combat laced with a razor-edged, fatalistic resolve. As the fleet cycled its colossal engines to life, shedding the static embrace of orbital docks, he became a force incarnate, a stormfront of grim focus, his entire being bent upon the single, blinding purpose of redeeming his chapter and his own besmirched honor upon the world that had wounded him. As final preparations surged, Deathwatch Sergeant Davin Imlach, a shadow torn from Sicarius's own heroic lineage, approached his former captain. The scarred veteran proffered a cylinder of dark, unknown alloy, cold to the touch and humming with contained, horrific power, a rare vortex grenade, a singularity engine capable of ripping its victim from reality, banishing it screaming into the Empyrean's mad depths. It was a weapon beyond priceless, bestowed as a token of respect, a gift offered in silent solidarity against the monstrous tide awaiting them. Imlach's gesture was scripture written in the unspoken language of warriors who know oblivion breathes down their necks, a potent tool gifted with the bone-deep understanding that the crucible ahead promised to consume almost all who marched into its fury. The void path to Damno's draped itself in peril, demanding not merely strength but cunning shadow play. Necron picket ships, silent and spectral, lurked like sharks in the asteroid belts and stellar dust of the system, sensors scanning eternally for the unwelcome signature of Imperial warships. Calgar deployed a lifetime's learning in subterfuge, each move a gambit, deploying scout prows and light escorts as feints, masking the true weight and destination of the main strike force within convoluted signal echoes and gravewave distortions. When at last the silent flotilla was detected by the alien sentinels, Calgar's purpose was already fulfilled. The warships of Ultramar were already plunging beyond interception range, hammering towards Damno's itself, fortresses hurtling out of the warp momentarily blind and shattering the frigid silence of the system. The window was mere minutes. Survival demanded immediate, decisive action. Calgar, his mind operating at the speed of prophecy, triggered the initial descent. Wave after wave of unmanned drop pods erupted from their launch bays, glowing red heat projectiles screaming into the planet's bitter atmosphere like descending comets carrying only silence and hollow metal. Their sole purpose, sacrifice. They rained down, drawing fire. Automated Gauss pylons, their sensors triggered by the unmistakable signature of massed impacts, spat torrents of emerald annihilation skyward. Beam after beam scoured the heavens, incinerating the empty decoys in flashes of vaporized steel, unloading their killing light uselessly into the frigid skies. It was the necessary distraction, the finite moments bought. As that curtain of sacrificial fire reached its zenith, Calgar unleashed the second wave. This storm fell not empty, but pregnant with humanity's vengeance. Scores of drop pods bearing hundreds of space marines, their rich cobalt wargear a defiant slash of color against Damno's, monochrome desolation of ice and ash, streaked through the thinning veil of defensive fire. Among them plunged the monoliths of Thunderhawk gunships, disgorging rank upon serried rank of Astra Militarum regiments hardened men and women, faces grimset beneath rebreathers, armor chilled by the descent and polished by decades, sometimes centuries, of standing unbowed before the Emperor's foes. Their objective was stark and deadly, spear deep into the blasphemous tomb complexes honeycombing the subterranean hellscape, find the abominable machines generating power for the faceless legions, and silence them forever. Terra met ice. The Ultramarines struck ground with hulls screaming, ramps slamming down to belch transhuman warriors into immediate, chaotic contact with Nightmare. The ice wastes themselves seemed to rise up against them. Crushing Gauss fire flared with unnatural vibrancy, ghostly green beams capable of unraveling reality slicing unimpeded through guardsmen flak, through ceramite blessed by Rise's tech priests, through rock-steel ice formations like they were paper. Necron warriors marched in terrifying lockstep, mindless, remorseless terminators gliding over the ice with impossible cohesion, their movements dictated by some vast, alien intellect from within the planetary sepulchre. Lasgun volleys glanced off necrodermis. Bolter shells detonated with satisfying blasts, only for the fallen target to shimmer and reassemble piece by nightmare piece moments later. This was their curse, an enemy that refused the finality of death, a tide that eroded rather than broke. Cold, relentless despair threatened the Imperial ranks more lethally than the enemy weapons. Among the Cyclopean monoliths and scanning pylons sat the heart of the abomination, the Tesseract Vault. Calgar instantly understood horror from ancient texts. This colossal, floating prison of impossible geometry pulsed with cold, alien light, energy radiating from it like a sickness. It bathed the entire necropolis in a shimmering shield that laughed at plasma cannon blasts. Melta beams intended to liquefy starship hulls flared and died like pathetic candles against its nigh-impenetrable glare. Calgar studied it with augmetic eyes far more advanced than human, seeing the symbiotic link. The vault protected the complex, but more it housed the horrific source of the terrifying Necron fortitude. Trapped within its shimmering, fractal cage thrashed a shard of Igra, the World Shaper, an echo of a Cetan, a caged godlet of cosmic hate. Ancient beyond Imperial reckoning, it bled weakness into the very Necrons it empowered. So long as the vault shielded it, their assault was futile, blood spilled for barren ice. Reason offered no answer. The calculus of conventional war had failed. Calgar's soul bellowed defiance. With a roar audible above the pandemonium, the chapter master enacted a gambit born of brutal pragmatism and suicidal courage. He charged, not away from the thickest streams of Gauss fire, but into them, a blue-armored juggernaut weaving through blasts that vaporized close-knit squads. His Terminator armor blistered and smoked, power fist flaring. He closed with a towering Gauss pylon near the vault, one its shot sputtering erratically damaged perhaps, or thrown off by the vault's own resonant energies. Reaching it, Calgar braced himself, augmented sinews screaming, the very genes of Guilliman straining. Physical dominance met arcane resilience. With a supreme, ground-shaking effort, he forced the weapon's crescent projector aperture, twisting the massive beam emitter not towards the Imperials, but towards the burning shield surrounding the Tesseract Vault. Erupting brilliance consumed sight and sensors. The beam struck, an impossible concentration of the anti-existence the Necrons wielded, hitting their own shield. Reality shrieked under the contradiction. With a thunderclap felt in the bone marrow of every warrior on the surface, the energy shield collapsed, fizzling out in cascades of dying emerald lightning. The inner latticework of the vault's structure stood naked and vulnerable for a heartbeat. Then, exposed, it shattered. Cruciform radiance, blindingly pure yet shot through with crawling geometric darkness like shattered glass, exploded upwards and outwards, birthing a new horror onto Damnos. Igra, the World Shaper, was free. The psychic and physical roar of its rage shattered all thought, flattened space marines and guardsmen alike like wheat stalks before a hurricane, hurling even Terminators yards through the air to crash against glaciers. It echoed across the continents, shaking the very mantle of the planet. The frozen crust groaned under titanic, unthinkable forces flexing after eons of confinement. Its backwash of energy ruptured ice fields miles distant, reshaping cliffs. Its ferocious anger, millennia of imprisonment fueling it, turned immediately upon its erstwhile controllers. Its first act of vengeance was horrific. The Necron overlord known only in Imperial records as the Undying, his command collapsing, attempted to flee, his consciousness attempting to face-jump deep within the planet to his sarcophagus tomb, a spiraling defile leading into crushing bedrock depths. He shimmered toward an escape route. The Catan perceived the attempt, this fragment of a god whose very domain was gravitic essence and material existence. With a thought as simple as breathing, it gestured. The earth itself obeyed, a vast fist of permacrete and living, stone the size of a hablock coalescing from the screaming rock, straight a thousands of feet below, and punching upwards with metronomic annihilating force. The Undying Overlord burst like a phantom caught in a hydraulic press, a silent, teleported mind obliterated in an instant before escaping its physical cage. Yet salvation, even in oblivion, was fleeting. Deep beneath, in the inner chamber housing the Overlord's inert sarcophagus regeneration systems, Squad Lazarius of the Crucible is unyielding, unmerciful, a forge whose flames burn away the last vestiges of chapter rivalry and ignite a terrifying new unity. Within the shadowed confines of Deathwatch service, space marines drawn from across the Imperium, from chapters steeped in ages-old suspicion and divergent creeds, are thrust together, forced to confront differences that might elsewhere fracture brotherhoods. Yet this friction, this initial grating of iron upon iron, is not some unfortunate accident. It is deliberately cultivated, hammered relentlessly under the crushing anvil of the long vigil. For it is against the monstrous, soul-scarring adversaries lurking beyond the Imperium's shuddering borders that such friction is transformed, tempered into an unbreakable alloy of absolute reliance. Brotherhood forged not immediately through shared heritage, but through the shared harrowing experience of looking into the void and seeing its alien eyes staring coldly back. Implicit trust becomes the shield, unshakable loyalty the weapon, bonds crystallizing under pressure into something purer, harder, exceeding even the zealous ties that once bound them solely to their original legions. By the time a Deathwatch kill team plunges into the chilling fury of battle, it is no longer merely a collection of individual Astartes, each carrying the invisible banner of distant chapter keeps. It has become a single entity, a weapon honed to an edge of impossible sharpness, a blade that exists only to strike with such fearsome precision and lethality that the alien foe finds itself obliterated before comprehending the force arrayed against it. This transformation is the marrow of their strength, the reason they stand as humanity's hidden knife. Their mandate, the sacred and terrible burden laid upon the shoulders of this chosen few, demands this unity, demands an unprecedented versatility and almost heretical ingenuity. As the chamber militant of the august and feared Ordo Xenos, the Deathwatch exists for one paramount, overriding purpose: the utter extermination of alien species whose existence poses a lethal threat to the God Emperor's realm, to purge them without question, without pity, wherever they breed in the lightless corners of a hostile galaxy. Yet their duty extends beyond simple, brutal eradication. Deathwatch Marines, uniquely among the Adeptus Astartes, bear the fraught, soul-suspect task of gathering knowledge, of apprehending and containing terrifying alien artifacts and devices left behind like cancers upon reality. And sometimes, in the darkest necessity, they must wield those very instruments of Xenos' iniquity against them, turning the weapon of the betrayer upon its maker. This perilous path requires nerves of adamantium and unwavering focus, for such usage stains not just the metal of the weapon, but potentially the very soul of the wielder, a profound danger both physical and ideological, echoing with whispers of corruption. Picture the devastating elegance of a captured Necron Catenfa's sword, its Neginergy blade humming with cold, sentient malice, gripped in the hand of a Deathwatch warrior amid the crushing tombs of some awakening world, employed solely to shatter the metal skeletons of its creators. Such blasphemous pragmatism is enacted only under the most stringent decree, overseen by the twin, wary gazes of the Ordo Xenos masters and the arcane tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, for the risks always teeter on the precipice of damnation. This complex mandate necessitates gathering the very best, the fiercest warriors, from the far-flung bastions of the Imperium's might. And here lies another fracture quickly smoothed by the Vigil's demands. Not all chapters rush towards this duty with open arms. Traditions run deep, suspicions institutional. The Black Templars, zealous crusaders unswerving in their personal oaths eternal, eye the machinations of the Inquisition with profound unease, a beady gaze trained on any perceived dilution of chapter autonomy. The Dark Angels, enmeshed in their own timeless secrets and burdened past, maintain a posture of profound, almost paralyzing suspicion. For them, contributing warriors can feel less like honor and more like sacrificing blood brethren into a potentially compromising orbit. The stoic, logic-driven Iron Hands, the doomed and aesthetic holofocused Blood Angels, the fiercely independent space wolves these powerhouses, too, maintain a relationship with the Inquisition that could charitably be described as strained, each viewing extended service under Deathwatch Black as a bitter pill to swallow, an onerous duty intertwined with ancient obligations rather than joyous honor. Yet tradition, duty forged in fire millennia past, and unwavering oaths sworn directly to the throne of Terra bind them. Implacable ties drag warriors from their chapter homes to contribute to the long vigil, regardless of the thorns of personal and collective reservation. In contrast, chapters like the meticulously code-spound Ultramarines, the ever-vigilant Crimson Fists forged from Rogel Dorn's lineage, and their primogenitors, the Imperial Fists themselves, embrace the alliance with the Deathwatch with far greater willingness. They acknowledge the deadly necessity, respect the purity of its xenocidal mission, and willingly tithe recruits, their objections muted by pragmatic recognition. Once inducted, however, regardless of whether they arrived proud or reluctantly, the color of their past life is subsumed beneath the deep black and austere silver. These Marines, veterans all, commit themselves entirely, body and mind, to the singular, ferocious purpose of the long vigil. Their philosophies may jar, their combat doctrines differ wildly, their personal rituals span the breadth of human expression distilled 1,000 times, yet they are bound together, fused into an unstoppable whole by a bedrock foundation of shared, all-consuming dedication to the Emperor's vision and a fierce primal hatred for the alien that transcends any previous loyalties. They stand shoulder to heavy ceramitek-led shoulder, a brotherhood of necessity forged in loathing and eternal vigilance. Time in the Deathwatch works its remorseless changes. Upon the conclusion of his tour, a Marine may be permitted, scarred in flesh and psyche, to return to the familiar fortress monasteries of his birth chapter. But he returns not as the warrior who left. He bears new, ugly cicatrices tracing tales of impossible encounters, and within his disciplined, battle-hardened mind lies the heaviest burden of all, secrets. Mountains of horrifying knowledge, detailed anathema, the true scale and maddening variety of Xenos threats pressing against the Imperium's crumbling borders. Secrets that will die with him, untold, unspeakable. He walks among his brothers, a silent monument to horrors unknown. Yet for many, the abrasion of the vigil becomes more than duty, deeper than any original oath taken. It transmutes into a calling resonant in their very bones. The sheer magnitude of the darkness observed, the intimate understanding of the fragile cataracts holding it back, makes a return seem insufficient, trivial. Hence, many remain, extending their service indefinitely, joining the esoteric ranks of watch captains or specialist roles apothecaries, delving into chitinous terror's biological signatures, librarians plumbing depths of alien psychic insanity, tech marines coaxing heresy from captured weaponry. Their entire identity, their reason for enduring, becomes subsumed entirely by the Deathwatch's sacred, endless battle. Whether they step back into their chapter's familiar rituals or remain anonymous sentinels behind the Black Shield, every Astartes who has endured the Deathwatch is irrevocably changed, marked by an esoteric journey few amongst his own brothers could comprehend, and fewer still will ever even glimpse. The psychic scar tissue is thicker than ceramic. Crucial to this transformation, essential to the very existence of the long vigil, is the impenetrable shroud of silence. Secrecy is absolute, a sacred burden enforced as vehemently by ancient tradition as by the aver-sharp, unforgiving scrutiny of the Ordo Xenos. Before any Marine sets foot within a watch fortress cloister, he swears a soul-bending oath of silence upon the bloodied weapons of legends. He vows unto death and beyond to confine every shred of knowledge gained, every dread experience witnessed, within the cloistered vaults of the Deathwatch itself. This sacred secrecy persists, a chain binding the soul, even upon return to his chapter. The former Deathwatch warrior becomes a living sepulchre, a prison gate barred within his own skull. His crippled silence stands as both a shield for the Imperium's fragile sanity, what societal terror, what traitorous curiosity might erupt if the sheer cosmic horror battering reality became common knowledge, and the ultimate searing testament to his unimaginable loyalty. Though temporary in duration for some, the long vigil burns an indelible brand upon the soul of every participant. A brother returning home seems outwardly the same, yet his perspective has stretched into terrifying dimensions, his resolve tempered not just by conflict, but by confronting true cosmic insanity. He resumes his duties, but his gaze is deeper, colder, haunted by alien nightmares he can confide in no one. Serving in the Deathwatch thus presents a harrowing crucible dared by the bravest, the sternest, and as a result, those who endure gain the rarest of stations, numbered amongst humanity's hidden sentinels, the final, shadowed shield straining to hold back the ever-rising alien tide threatening to drown the stars themselves. To support this relentless war, outposts must stand, bastions against annihilation. Watch fortresses are these lonely citadels, behemoths of adamantium and faith adrift in the fathomless, hostile reaches of the void. Isolated, often hidden in orbit around unimportant, unsuspecting worlds far from Imperial notice, they form a galaxy-wide web of vigilance. Each fortress is never merely a base. It lunges from the dark like a clenched fist aimed at the stars, a grim sentinel perpetually scanning, observing, intercepting, and crucially, annihilating alien incursions before the shimmering motes of their unspeakable ambition can reach the vital, psychic spark of humanity's core worlds. In these desperate times of the era Indomitus, where warp storms shred astropathic choirs and pathways through the howling Empyrean become traps or grim dead ends, these fortresses function precisely as ancient watchtowers once did amidst frontier nights choked with predatory shadows, points of light impossibly distant, yet connected by unbreakable oaths. They are spread desperately thin across the crumbling expanse of the Imperium, many concealed from the very worlds they bleed to protect. Every sanctuary, every silent bastion, serves a pivotal function, yet each one evolves uniquely under the pressure of the specific, ever-shifting Xenos threat it monitors. Some are colossi, great void stations echoing with the measured tread of hundreds of Deathwatch brethren, warrens of strategy chambers, armories reeking of sanctified oil and ozone, and prisons for forbidden trophies taken from the corpses of star gods. Others are compact, hyper-specialized, tracking arrays focused on a single war-torn sector, silent listening posts embedded deep within gravitational anomalies, or Spartan refueling depots where kill teams gather fleeting respite before vanishing again into the abyss. Among these scattered jewels of defiance stands Tassa Prime, once the greatest, an entire world shaped by the Deathwatch, gifted centuries passed by the stoic ultramarines from their bounteous realm. For generations, its hive-like fortresses served as the preeminent crucible for Deathwatch recruits, its orbital yards bristling with the might needed to safeguard vast swathes. But the formation of the galaxy-gouging Great Rift severed its dark majesty. Now fortresses like Praefectus Voagus, its corridors echoing with newly inducted vigilance destined for the nightmare realm of Imperium Nihilus, and the towering cathedral synsteel of Fort Excalibur, shoulder the terrifying responsibility of coordinating, equipping, and propelling the forces fighting vainly to guard Saul's lost half. Within these anguished bastions, the air thrums continuously with grim preparation. The bone-shaking thump of enhanced bolt gun drills echoing through deep chambers, the searing flicker of plasma cutters sculpting siege parapets onto fortifications strong enough to halt biotitans, the guttural chant of kill teams enacting chainsaw kata in preparation for tyrannid swarms, rolling towards them like crimson decease flood, seasoned veterans recounting the uncountable weaknesses of countless Xenos bioforms to grim-faced neophytes. Here are the beating, scarred hearts of the Vigil's desperate defense. Lord of it all at the oppressive Ororakurani illuminated core is the indomitable presence of the Watch Commander, chosen from amongst grim legends, a warrior who has stood exposed within the Xenos maelstrom for centuries, his measured tread echoing down fortified halls, his armor a canvas recording narratives told in bullets, scars, and inert alien energy burns intersecting across its history-blackened surface. Typically, this mantle rests upon the shoulders of a Watchmaster, whose very gaze seems to weigh tactics forged against creature logic older than Earth itself. Though in depleted fortresses, a veteran watch captain might clutch the immense responsibility, knowing it may become his new purgatory forever. This commander wields ultimate control, his decisions dictating the fortress's grueling schedule of constant readiness, the ebb and flow of its interior guard cadre, the wrenching deployment of kill teams to scream into the teeth of existential threats tearing at nearby star clusters. Supporting him stands the stratagem, a council steeped in dread expertise, specialists whose original skills honed within their revered chapters have been warped, forced to adapt to the unique, nerve-shredding exigencies of the Deathwatch. Here dwell the apothecaries, not just healers, but forensic nightmares. They stand sentinel not only over torn bodies, but over twisted genetics, sniffing for any sign of soul-staining contamination seeped from bioweapons spilled during monstrous engagements, analyzing enemy-flensed matter with mixtures of disgust and cold science. The librarians, hooded and warden-minded, keep focus beyond the physical. Perpetually braced, they guard against the psychic gibberish clawing from beyond perceived reality, prepared to tear apart warp constructs crafted by species wielding minds like starship-lancing claws, minds shattering and rebuilding impossible geometries through sheer malicious will. Tech Marines are entrusted treasures far beyond any mundane chapter forge, the lifeblood of the kill teams themselves. Extraordinarily advanced wargear whispers with machine spirits revered as near-divine. They maintain, they are modified, they adapt. Crucially, they descend into the darkest art, the sanctioned study and perilous adoption of captured Xenos weapons. They approach this duty steeped in both the hard logic drilled into them beneath the infosphere of the Mechanicus and the soul-deep caution knowing the weapons they prod back to lethal functions scream obscenities at the laws of human reality and comprehension. They oversee soul-straining trials of fiendish weapons taken from silent tomb worlds and hive-ship brains, the fragile abominations held during battle, sometimes only operable for moments before meltdown or worse, balancing lethality against catastrophic existential danger. This is the leadership core holding the storm wall, deeper into the fortress layout formation, the vital operational units. Each fortress orbits not around a planet, but around multiple watch companies, typically commanded by the iron fist of a watch captain, supported by 2 watchful lieutenants. These companies, however, don't resemble standard Kogs-prescribed formations familiar from Line Battle Brothers chapters elsewhere. They are leaner, more focused threats. Each contains typically 50 or fewer inhabitants, organized relentlessly around specialized killing units, typically 4 or 5 kill teams per company. Crowded together, yet maintaining distinct identities, Each company bears its own esoteric patterns displayed with defiant pride splashes of fire engine, red slashed diagonally onto greaves, fractal silver whorls crawling across shoulder guarding blackness, glyphs derived from ancient Terran protective wards etched sharply into pauldron rims. On the relentless parade decks deep within Arctic dark silos, these markings flicker under green-hued lumens, lending unique identity amid the otherwise all-consuming black and silver. This fosters fiercest Spritacorps even within the unforgiving crucible. An iron fist poses beside a space wolf, each glaring beneath their belonging symbol, a tiny flickering of ancient tradition seared onto Deathwatch severity. Crucially, these companies are not rigid tombs. They are fluid weapons under the strategist's pitiless mind. When immense alien surges occur, when the Necrons awaken, entire tomb clusters simultaneously spewing legions. When Kraken fleets surge en masse in impossible consistencies, the companies adapt. Restructuring occurs with brutal efficiency, specialized against specified threats clattering towards their assigned sector. Battle Brothers seamlessly migrate from one kill team to another within the company structure. Their unique skill sets a grim currency traded to address the ever-ebbing tactical threat pool, converging upon the fortress's sentinel perimeter. The beating, scorched heart of it all, though, remains the kill team. This is the Deathwatch's terrible spearpoint. Each one uniquely assembled, uniquely formed into a weapon forged for one horrifyingly precise mission profile, a brutal tool meticulously shaped to butcher an aspect of Infinity's chaotic Xenos tapestry. No two are identical. Please abandon such pedestrian expectations. Some are raging, terrifying blenders, openly assembling commanders, drawn from multiple chapters. Blood Angel leaping ahead, firing inferno pistols with omniscioplist heat, alongside stoic Dark Angels slamming force shields into writhing Genestealer talons, while Imperial Fist Devastators pour lethal hellfire patterns across the chitinous tide, coordinated by a riftborn space wolf taupe color, remorselessly pitting poison blades against staggering monstrosities, all clad in variants of tactical dreadnought plate and enhanced wargear unheard beyond these walls. Another configuration might pivot violently around operational capability. Imagine a team assembled exclusively for stripping Tyranid synapse creatures from seething swarms comprising Hatradun-buried Carcharoddons ripping flesh amid impossibly tangled structures, backed by terrifying ultramarine biologists afflicting spore cloud obliterations, whilst Raven Guard veterans strike silently vulnerable neural concentrations. A terrifying mission hunting minds sculpted from warpure madness deep in Craftworld Wraithbone labyrinths relies utterly upon a librarian-dominated kill team. His mind a castle gate fortifying against wailing biopsychic onslaught, potentially utilizing numbing pariah presence if such rare anathemaline genes mark one blessed by temporal chaos. Flexibility is survival instinct incarnate here. Adaptability is the warrior gene cranked beyond acceptable design. Facing adversaries inherently as diverse and alien as the galaxies swirling beyond the corpsolite of Sol, there cannot exist a stagnant tool. When strategically designated under the sacred Aquila configuration, drone-enhanced, saturated in sophisticated sensors, escorted by advanced rhinos acting as rolling depots amidst monumental dangers, kill teams become startlingly flexible phalanxes, able to force their will across environments changing wildly within sectors. Contrast the Primaris fortified Fortis kill team configuration, its fearsome capability becoming legendary even amid the era Indomitus, a baseline capability built to confront unknown, nightmarish threats bursting upon untold civilized regions, able to pivot brutality from overwhelming heavy firepower coverage to terrifying shock assault against numerically impossible overwhelming forces within nanoseconds of threat assessment. Such characteristic malleability ensures even single kill teams carry sufficient strategic weight and vicious adaptability to confront legionary forces fielded by conventional chapters, lacking Deathwatch's honed, tortuously collected expertise. It is this monstrous specialization which allows, horrifically, a single squad of fewer than 10 Dark Sentinels to suddenly cripple a colossal Tyranid biovessel carrying millions approaching worlds strong with Imperial Guard regiments, or surgically shatter the command node orchestrating Orc WAGs nearing critical mass decibel annihilation, thresholds capable of shattering star systems. No, the deployment explicitly signifies immediate, potentially sphere-threatening alien dangers echoing unto Apocalypse song, when an entire pitted black kill team dispatches from shadowed voidicking ports within a watch fortress. It resounds as the softest tremor beneath Imperial boots attuned enough within vast hierarchies to perceive such events, alerting military minds worldwide. For such privileged servants aware of its existence, it represents stark warning abruptly coupled alongside strange reassurance. If reality twists further towards imminent oblivion, if commanders challenge sanity, witnessing instantaneous emergence escalating unto total annihilation potential only then echoes the convergence trajectory of an entire watch company. The fortress commits its structural fabric. This deployment sequence screams only one thing: an imminent cataclysm affirmative. A sector-ending oblivion vector threshold breached imperially. A declaration delivered coldly unto high lords unseen that humanity itself, fractured upon worlds untold, suddenly sways terribly upon the precipice, requiring immediate countersurgical blade cut into the universe before absolute metabolic meltdown. Normally against Xenos infestations, requiring obscene violence, but confined catastrophe predictions, restricted to specific vectors, warrior cult development, stages encapsulating an entire hive city world. A tomb world awakening slow annihilation radiation pulses, starting deployment sufficient remains solely within the kill team tier. With terrifying control, they often emerge commanded by the team's most weathered orchestral warrior, the Deathwatch Sergeant, whose battle certification becomes the inherited mantle, perpetually alive upon vessel logs, bearing its deadly name like an inherited shroud or potent legend unto itself. Occasionally, however, necessity dictates further escalation. Certain missions require talents beyond battle-torn sergeants attempting fierce coordination mid-horrorfilled suppression zones. Should those lethal classifications enacted imply profound risks taxing mental physical constructs unto annihilation, parameters infiltration requiring tech systems analysis layered impossibly atop psychic shielding against emergent mindscape krakens, already aboard colossal void installations, momentarily, the command shifts dramatically upwards. Entire teams witness sudden death transference of authority unto heavy officers hailing from specialist roles, anchored back solidly within the fortress. Librarians radiating grim focus over sputtering projector servers, displaying intel fragments, already corrupted fields screaming metaphor brute force assaults. Apothecaries burdened simultaneously preventing team biological collapse, while endeavoring to steal invaluable geniassassin, specific pathogen rivers, ripping open reality towering beyond extant maps. In those rare moments, the team's designation shifts. Expunged name falls away, replaced officially manifestly temporarily. Kill team, Librarius Castorex engaging stellar breach procedure to enact warding containment immediacy targeting Nestero, IV ultimate evacuation schedule, windows collapsing locally. Yet even within this strict apparatus, designed solely for utter lethality etched deeply within Deathwatch service history books smudged with annihilation records, remains absolute commitment towards necessary dynamic, swift, silent restructuring possibilities. Kill teams trained annihilation machines ensure roster flexibility, provision guarantees battling shifting galactic horror demands. Constant readiness exists, mind heart deployment exercises, infest habit rapidly. Fragmentation routines mastered upon apocalyptic conditioning strips down Sentinel Warconsumate experience, immediately into volatile smaller attack packets. Should objective consequences shatter suddenly operating parameters, creating insurgencies behind primary surge vectors unaccountable originally. Previous mission lessons seep perpetually chains function forming cadre backbone collective expertise, expanding inevitably group cohesion levels across generations. Across dark centuries, a structured immortality occurs whereupon chosen teams etch names unforgettable, transcending standard installation assignment rotation cycles. Legends like Kill Team Kasha. Warriors operating continuously through catastrophe clusters, requiring supreme brutality against planet grief poured upwards through tiers spatial reality torrentially flooding. Inflicted wounds hold scars layer over corruption invisible, almost commemorating endurance tremendous, sustained through decades conflict requiring psychological sync, sustained impossible levels, longer normal Astartes expected timeframe, even upon harshest crusade conditions. Bonds emerge captivating observers, achieving commanders' eternal live asset priorities, comparative fortress garrison sections, simulant sapiency, null equivalent strategic significance, realized containment warfare paramount, reduced territory attrition globally swiftly immortal dark chapters, calling architects carnage strength wound forever soul cohesion, beyond mechanical significance, understand metrics impossible command nodes, value measure. Each watch fortress consequentially remains essentially chapter, unto itself unified desperately contracted against infinite terror, unleashed perpetually. Its intense corridors truly ringing eternally preparedness recoil emphasis, phase-moved attuned strategy, overpowering continuously. Halls lined history stark-authored victories, terrifying skull totems, token final chokeholds, held establishments, primeval soulless veracity arrogant celestial waste, gleaming quietly collections heresy flesh artistry enemy apparatus, structured profoundly unknowable efficiency, broken proudly upon claws warrior actions, etched memory banks consoles shimmering deepest overwatch silently waiting clouds massacre, overcoming gazed emptiness universes, edges grief pools glowing leached vitality universe. Expansion rampant darkness. Representative every installation wielded consciousness killers, unceasing founded solely solidified implacable indestructible vigil core, delivered immense burden solely born titans grim determination, closing fathomless depths preparing shred immaterium echoes, desperate every laden silence permeating enshrines existence purpose embodying the watch eternal. Death deployed doctrine follows signal structured uniquely, concentrated shadow striking impossible. Adaptability supreme beyond considerations, fighting philosophy, restricting unparalleled lethality wrought perfection. Soldiers deployed minimal external support, foregoing sometimes altogether functioning cutoff strategy, demanding sacred isolation, terrifying unbreakable discipline, alone reaching far behind enemies conceived battle zones, cultivated shadow slaughter, suddenly erupting slicing conceptual defenses, deep amidst towering aggressions, galactic annihilation, fever unleashed planetary scale catastrophically unstoppable eth structures. Objectives defined razor sharp, acquiring vital intelligence, working apparatus folding antithesis unseen threats, climbing through stolen tunnels tackling seemingly occupation-sized alien occupancies, through motions betrayal manipulation, backed overwhelming shock annihilation, delivered finally extraction, without microfracture documentation shadows left history, bereft footprint condemned empires ink authority, never admitted existence records, locked vault eternally. Kill team led experience immeasurable watchful officer potent leadership. Watch captain emerging labyrinth generational conflict, understanding alien anatomy fearlessly shield gesture, conquering dissent, overcoming traitor ignition simply, will strength galvanize 5 elements unto perfect breath synchronizing uninhibited strike simultaneously multiple vectors, sheer unity violence manifesting. Librarian elongated warfare shattering unstable projections, bleeding volatile energy walls, shutting communication channels, entire hidden campaigns orchestrated psychic command nodes, whilst alien consciousness refutes callously shattering theories physics reinforcing ghastly comprehended stability, maintaining battlefield composition, imploding sanity realities, surrounding structure cohorts, enforce unstable reality surface concentrations, witnessed experts impossibly understandably entity formation. Battering perception peripheries. Rarely, these leaders replaced entirely icon-bearer within Ordo Xenos doctrine. Inquisitor ascending command dread imperial mandate shattered constraints commanding ultimate authority, imperiously ordering instant cessation operations, demanding unquestioned dedication, suspending imperative all boundaries impeding purification, enacted instantly. Such representative carrying pan-imperial security clearance, classified apocalyptic level ordinarily impossible fathom organization, suddenly engulf all combatants releasing unreasonable resources, abruptly commands compliance ground forces regiments Astra Militarum, mobilized committing warning existence, collapsed immediate crisis zones, breach containment, intended deployment entire allied space marine chapters, mustered terrifying duration, requiring notification authorities foresee. Unforeseeable consequence policy abandonment, existing strategy, independently mandated realization, imperial purity precarious teetering magma, openly erupting precedents over centuries acceptable risk, protocols classification ignored reign. Dread apparatus essential Deathwatch supremacy, enters equation intimately weaponry fielded tiny hyperelite teams, exists unmatched imperial technology vault standard Astartes chapters. Nodes gravitational stabilization harnessing energy curving lenses, mounting tuned heavy applications, suspends agency intricate targeting systems, representing dark tech impossible replication, widespread, demand suppressing gyroscopic tremble firing sequence, converted feasible shoulder-mounted platforms, Terminator squad concept feasible operating strategic movable fortresses, weapon framework withstand pressures, gravity wells impossible otherwise maneuver. Thus they plunge, isolated demigods bearing weapons of impossible age refracting forbidden science, sin graceless conflict ranting background noises galactic war, expressed supremely specialized hatred-focused instrument of silence, surrounding specific operation, terminally soundless razors slicing darkness precisely. World killers sublimating conflict unto godlike efficiency, wielding relic powers unstoppable faith replacing support. Savant flesh weapons breaching barriers understanding terrifying solitude, bearing the crushing cosmic darkness upon dented silver pauldrons proclaiming unending vigil. The air screamed with the precision kill. Bolt rounds cracked, each a micro-symphony of death function, where M40 targeter lenses focused hatred into pinpoint annihilation. Yet the Deathwatch kill teams knew that precision alone was a luxury often denied in the face of the alien horde. Their arsenal was a grim catalog of specialized retribution, each round a testament to xenomorphic suffering. Metal storm fragmentation shells shrieked into clustered masses, a geyser of jagged fury detonating with fatal promiscuity, shredding the thinner hides and carapaces of lesser tyrannid broods or Gretchen mobs, painting the walls in foul vidi. Against tougher prey, the chitinous leviathans heaving across charnel fields, the Necronter nightmares clad in unyielding living metal, the kill teams unleashed the Kraken penetrator bolts. These were instruments of brutal physics, hypersonic darts punched from roaring bolters designed solely to pierce, core, and liquefy internal structures, a contemptuous answer to hides that repelled standard bolts like rain. Necessity, the cruelest master, demanded even darker choices. The Deathwatch, pragmatism overriding dogma born of desperation, sometimes turned the enemy's own blasphemous power against them. Secured, monitored with redundancies that still felt perilously inadequate, wielded with the sickening intimacy of holding disease to the vein, alien weapons spat volatile, poorly understood energies. These were not tools of war grasped with pride, but instruments of grim purpose deployed only when failure meant annihilation, when the alien might otherwise lumber through even the most potent Imperial sanctums unharmed. Surprise was the kill team's starkest weapon, a tactic woven into their very genes. To stand toe-to-toe in grinding attrition was the folly of armies they were not permitted to be. Their creed was the lightning strike, the unseen blade, the sudden oblivion. Insertion was an art form in terrifying geometries, the gut-wrenching, thunderclap emptiness whispering behind the ears as teleportariums vomited them into the pulsing heart of a bioship furnace, the hurricane roar, the pressure-squeezing breath from lungs during near-suicidal graveshoot drops from orbit. The subterranean nightmare passage aboard termite drilling vehicles, their origins traced to the enigmatic leagues of Votan, grinding through planetary crusts like ancient metal worms, erupting floor plates beneath the startled foe, death spilling from the smoking earth itself. Emergence dictated formation, and flow a seamless shift dictated by the mission writ in blood. Some plunged teams into pools of absolute silence. Corridors swallowed footsteps, shadows bled into ceramite silence, blade work and the thump of suppressed bolt discharges, executing key synaptic creatures or sentinels with cold, silent finality. Other missions roared into being as tempests of fire and fury, kill teams coalescing around heavy flamers and crackling power fists or the thunderous percussion of assault cannons, becoming unstoppable fists of Imperial retribution smashing through unprepared enemy ranks. Survival hinged on this lethal mutability, each warrior a master alone, yet bound in instinctive, devastating concert with his brothers, knowing thoughts through the rhythm of combat, ending threats with the chilling efficiency of a machine. And the era Indomitus birthed threats that tested this efficiency to its absolute shattering bone. Xenos incursions swelled beyond containment, flooding into planetary gulfs and star-spanning voids. The Tyrannid swarm, that cosmic instrument of endless hunger, descended in numbers choking the void. Hive fleets Behemoth and Kraken, though supposedly broken, left festering tendrils gnawing at the Imperium's coreward flanks, burning worlds into sterile husks. But it was Leviathan, a new terror secreted from beneath the galactic core, its shadow probing towards Segmentum Solar, spitting advanced splinter fleets at humanity's waning heart, that loomed like the final, chittering apocalypse. Simultaneously, the Necrons, ancient masters denied dominion, shuddered awake in legions vast and cold from timeless slumber. Tomb worlds cracked open across the void, ancient protocols driving them to scour the galaxy of perceived chaos of life itself. These unyielding phalanxes, armed with weapons that shattered physics and sanities alike, reality unraveling within temporal bubbles, molecular disassembly rays forced the Deathwatch into frontiers of horror and knowledge, where even their vaunted archives struggled. To fight them was to fight time, physics, and death itself, and the Orcs. Under the half-med preachings of Gozkul Mag Uruk Thraka, prophet of Gork and Mork, they amassed into a green tide of unparalleled violence, Leviathan hordes drawn from uncounted galaxies, a wave of ripping claws, bellowing war cries, and dafty yet devastating Kludgetech threatening to drown entire sectors in primal fury. Against this sheer biomass, even the Deathwatch required surgical strikes aimed at throats and vital machines, a desperate fingertip holding back the dam burst of planetary invasion. Elite they were, but the numbers arrayed against them were a suffocating tide. The Imperium bled warriors across countless war zones, and the Deathwatch faced a hemorrhaging of its own sacred strength. Ancient, star-forged oaths bound the Space Marine chapters to furnish warriors for the long vigil, tithes of flesh and spirit promised millennia past. but the calls now came incessantly. Frantic screams battered back across stellar gulfs from besieged watch fortresses. The response was veins strained thin, crackling with exhaustion. Chapters bled white by their own desperate crusades and the galaxy-rending demands of the terrible Indomitus crusade demanded by Guilliman. Reinforcements trickled in, not poured. The answer, the angel of necessity with pale blue crests, was the Primaris. Fortis kill teams strode onto the stage, the enhanced grit and adaptability of these next-generation angels of death bolstering the dwindling watch companies. Yet this new blood was bitter wine. The sheer scale and urgency bypassed the ancient induction rites and slow transfer of cult lore. Primaris Marines, titans clad in refined ceramite, possessed raw, terrifying power barely leashed, but lacked the decades, the centuries of intimate knowledge meticulously passed down on the specific hate patterns of every Xenos breed. Amongst veteran Watch brothers, etched with the psychic scars of fighting horrors the Primaris might never have encountered, suspicion festered. Hard-won secrets, reflexes born of agony against ancient foes, felt unknown. A friction crackled in the armories and oath saws, a tension beneath the aquila, where the rock-solid cohesion of old teams felt subtly frayed by this inexperience, a layer of brittle unfamiliarity over the deep, specialized xenocide that was their heritage. This dire need for reinforcement, however, twisted under a countercurrent, a betrayal bleeding from the purported heartland of humanity's defenders. As the Deathwatch pleaded for warriors, desperation crackling in every astropathic choirloom, an opposite trajectory unfolded, further weakening its core. Chapters hounded by catastrophic losses, corrupted worlds, the psychic tempest of the Great Rift howling across their domains, began recalling their own veterans. They petitioned formally, imploringly, arguing necessity with paths thick with the scrape-shredding cost to honor and sacred oaths sworn in blood 10 millennia past. For some chapters, the secretive Dark Angels, the Gen-accursed Blood Angels, the iron-willed and unyielding Iron Hands whose fealty to the Inquisition, and by uncomfortable proxy, the Deathwatch, had ever been equivocation beneath ceremony, these recalls were less plea than assertion. They voiced fundamental distrust, arguing the resources demanded were needed here now, on the crumbling edges of their own domains against foes claiming Gene-legacies and Forge worlds, devotion to their own existential battles trumping distant vigil. How sacrifice the chapter's singular champions, its irreplaceable icons of prowess, to a cause seemingly steered by the capricious, manipulative hand of the Ordo Xenos, was not the vigil entangled like bitter vines with the meddling Inquisition. It felt less duty, more requisition, and the Inquisition, ever scheming, whispers drifting like poison smoke through star-charted corridors, hands branded with radical seals inflamed this tension. Promises flickered, resources diverted, inconvenient scrutiny delayed, offered in return for loyalty continued, not truly promised, merely coerced. It became a quiet political war. One misstep, one abraded sensibility, could turn vital allies into hostile satellites. Some watch fortresses engineering fragile compromises, bent tradition to snapping point. Brothers returning homeward, the skull and skiff insignia still gleaming on their pauldron, retained nominal allegiance to the watch yet lent their priceless experience, that refined hatred against specific alien nightmares, directly to their parent chapter's immediate fires. These emissaries fought alongside their brothers, carrying Deathwatch precision like a dread gift. But for the scattered watch fortresses themselves, this was cold comfort. The core sisterhood, the unwavering permanence of dedicated kill teams, diminished ever further, replaced by a fluctuating tide of borrowed blades. These immense pressures, the gasping demand for bodies against the racking theft of irreplaceable souls, altered the Deathwatch spirit. Historically, the long vigil was sanctity. It was a forged testing body against impossible Xenos crucibles, mind against galactic-spanning nightmare, soul against the dissolution lurking behind the alien's eyes. It crowned transcendence, a brotherhood sealed in blood and secrecy beyond mere chapter bounds that birthed camaraderie stronger perhaps than lineage, an Imperium within the Imperium retaining fierce loyalty to its own unique vigil. Now, the ceaseless departures poisoned this wellspring. The summons back, the seeing of Ansebrothers locking gazes now clouded with suspicion across a stratagem, replaced hallowed rite with conflicted ordeal. Rome felt distant, estrangement, cold and venomous, coiled where unity once sang. For chapters steeped in autonomy, whose very blood roared defiance against restraint like the Black Templars or Fenris-born space wolves, the vigil bore a new weight, a blade held against their heart. Reverence remained, but apprehension coiled around it. Creating cohesion within current kill teams demanded exhausting reservoirs of psychic focus and implacable discipline, countering not merely the howling alien maelstrom beyond the void shields, but the chilling internal storms of fractured allegiances drawn tight across strained bonds. As the Indomitus era ground souls to dust, the Deathwatch endured, its structure warped by impossible pressures, holding the blazing frontier against the drowning dark. Discipline remained iron, but worn thinner. Unity burned yet colder. Their stoic defiance was monumental, a hate as pure as diamond tipped against the absolute eclipse. Yet beneath the unyielding Aquila, within sealed visors breathed upon by exhaustion, lay the heavy corrosion of disillusion. The revered foundations cracked. Honor felt bartered over transmission static. Whether this resilient skeleton, skull-clad and unbowed, could endure the soul-deep fractures spiderwebbing its ancient fortresses, whether Ordo Xenos' meddling or chapter defiance would finally shatter the precarious balance, was the unspoken question screaming louder than tyrannid synapse shrieks in that damned darker age. They held. Silence was their shield, but resentment hummed silent beneath layers of ceramite and oath. The structure creaked mighty, yet strained to the deep bone beneath. For how long? Duty did not yield the answer. Only the persistent scuttle of alien horrors outside the crumbling walls and the groaning thunder of Galaxy's End.